This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing. The second round of the journey to Munich takes us through Sebring International Raceway. It is an airport track, but it's one that has been home to so much endurance racing over the last 50 years plus. Today, we got teams of 2 drivers racing for 120 minutes, try and punch their ticket to Munich at the end of the year and also win themselves some cash prizes along the way. So hello and welcome to Sebring and welcome to the BMW SIM 120 Cup here as Will Vincent alongside Randy Cheneth here on RaceSpot TV, streaming live on the iRacing Esports Network and along BMW's social media. There's a look at our track conditions right now. It's currently 32 degrees centigrade on track. That's 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind speed, well, it's an airport track, so of course you expect it to be breezy. 9 miles an hour right now. That's about 14 kilometers an hour, although it's dipping just as we say. And Randy, qualifying is underway as we speak, and Team Redline Blue are currently embroiled in a little bit of a qualifying battle with Commander SIM Sport. Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have guessed that in 2020 we'd be seeing Redline and Coanda do battle in both qualifying, and I'm sure it's going to be fun watching them in the race, and this is going to be a fantastic event, Will, and qualifying so important at this track. Very racy, but the opening of this, things can get really strung out, and if you're starting in the mid-pack or down on back, you're going to lose a ton of time on the front runners.
Yeah, so it's currently Team Redline Blue who's got themselves an advantage over, actually no, Team Redline Blue in second place. I take that back. They're 3 tenths per second behind Koana Sim Sports right now, and they're just heading themselves into the back end of the racetrack down towards Le Mans corner, turn at number 16. We had ourselves a huge long montage to start this event, and then YouTube, thank you YouTube, but out of turn 16, Le Mans down the Ullman straightaway right now for Max Benecke, heading himself in towards Sunset Bend in a moment. 2 qualifying laps is what these drivers have. We'll put the sector times up there for Benecke into Sunset Bend for his second and final qualifying time through that final corner, and a little bit of snap oversteer for the centre. Pushes out wide on the exit of the corner, and he's got a 153.8 to beat, and he does not improve on that second qualifying time. So Benecke will not get pole position. It looks as though that might be this driver of Joshua Rogers and his Koana Sim Sports number 81 team.
Yeah, they're right now decimating the field. The only team to get into the 53s at all, Will, up by 4 tenths of a second. That's an enormous margin and way more than we're ever used to seeing from these guys. So Josh putting in a brilliant effort here in qualifying. Everything else behind really close. MSI and Redline Blue, they're within the same 10th. BS competition only about another half a tenth back as well. So right now Coanda really just the clear standouts, is nearly half a second quicker than anyone in the quali.
And let's have a look at what they're racing for. As you say, there's 6 races in this BMW SIM 120 Cup. We've already had one at Daytona. We got today at Sebring, then May at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, then Spa-Francorchamps, Road Atlanta, and Interlagos. And all routes head to Munich because the winning entry for each of these events will get themselves an invitation to the end-of-year sim racing event at Munich. as well as $1,200 per driver. $600 per driver for second place, $300 per driver for third. And, well, Randy, as we always know, those points on those prizes, especially in the new era of sim racing, they mean so much.
Yeah, they really do. And obviously I think for a lot of these guys, the big honor is just going to be getting the invite to Munich. So I think that's what everyone really is wanting to see. We've already got one team who's got the invite for that after we come out of Daytona, and second race in Florida here as we get a little bit deeper now into 2020 and more of these races in our back. It's been a couple months since we've gone racing in this championship, and this should be another fantastic one.
Let's run yourself through your starting grid, shall we? For this, then, the BMW 120 Sim Cup here from Sebring. And at the front of your field, it is going to be Kiwana Sim Sports. Joshua Rogers, 153.872 was their qualifying time. Red Bull Racing Esports moved themselves up to second place late on in qualifying, just 2 tenths of a second back from Kiwanda. Seb will line up on the outside of that first row. Team Redline Blue with Rax Beneke will be on the inside of that second row, joined by MSI Esports, and Alejandro Sanchez in the number 14 car will be taking that car, we presume, to the green flag. Then BS Competition on the inside of row number 3. Going to talk a lot about them over the course of this race. A new entry into this, working in partnership with a lot of things going on in German sim racing. Team Redline Orange in P number 6 and AAA Esports White in P number 7. AAA Esports Black make it an all AAA Esports row number 4. Then row 5, Williams Esports Chill Blast and Team Redline Black. The Team Redline Black car being driven by Anchen Kuven, 6 tenths of a second almost behind pole position. Logitech G Altus Esports in P number 11, and they'll be joined on row number 6 by the second Kiwana Sim Sports car and Ricardo Castro Lado. On to row number 7 as the pace car starts its long journey, a full pace lap here around Sebring. Williams Esports BenQ in P13, Apex Racing Team in 14th, and the Tyrus Cloak Company, Colac Company even, in P number 15, and Vanderbilt Sim Racing on the outside of that 8th row. Row number 9 will be Prologue React Esports and Radicals on the line. Good to see Radicals up in the top 20 of one of these big events once again. And Williams Esports Razor and Movano Sim Racing Team round out row number 10. Rolling Sim Sport and SimRC.de in row number 11. Williams Esports and Team Redline Green in row number 12. Running Sim Sport and Kiwana Sim Sports round out row number 13 with Racecraft Esports and Rapido Sim Racing Team in the 14th row. And there is the rest of the field coming up on your screen. Riaz Biatz Racing with GoPro Pablo Lopez in 29th. HM Engineering in 30th place, as those last results will tick through on your screen right now. And once again, Randy, an absolute stacked field here today at Sebring.
Yeah, I don't think this surprises anybody. 49 cars all getting lined up and getting ready for a couple hours of racing. Everyone's got their single driver teammate lined up, and it's all going to be, I think, to watch here at the start with the likes of Sebastian Job and Josh Rogers and Max Beneke. Those top 3, those really have been 3 of the best drivers in the sim over the last 24 months or so on the roadside, and we got them starting 1, 2, 3. It's going to be great watching them do battle once again.
Here's a look at the BS competition. Just talked about them a moment ago. You can see the Dazen logo on their car there. Of course, a huge streaming service in Germany as well as in America and other parts of the world. They've headed into sim racing along with Bruno Sud, and they are really a fantastic looking livery on that car. But we'll talk more about them over the course of this race. But out front, Beneke, number 71 team. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, Randy, they didn't have things all go their way when we were running in our last big iRacing special event. Today, they are looking to try and get themselves up and win a race, but they've got 2 very fast teams to get past if they're going to do that.
Yeah, they do. Both Red Bull and Coanda, both of these teams have a ton of experience, of course, like we mentioned. And you're right, not a lot of luck for those guys the last time out, but they're definitely going to be looking to turn that around. And what a way to potentially do it here at Sebring. $1,200, $2,400 per driver on the line if you can pull off a win, and of course that invite to Munich. And I know that would mean so much to that organization as they pull down the Ullman Straight and get ready to head into sunset at half power for the only time today.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of these drivers will be saving a lot of fuel right now because of the fact that it's a 120-minute race. A full pace lap here at Sebring will mean that these drivers will think about the number and how much fuel they need to try and save for that first pit stop to give them maximum opportunity when they get through to the second half of this race. But that pace car is going to head itself on towards pit road. Josh Rogers will be the driver to take the green flag in just 1 moment's time then. Ready to go racing here at Sebring in the BMW SIM 120 Cup. Green flag in the air. We are racing 4 wide already down in your pack as the drivers will storm through turn number 1 for the first time and now head themselves tightens down in towards that turn 2, 3, 4 complex, Randy.
Yeah, this is going to be where this entire field starts to single file out through turn 3, turn 4, onto turn 5, and now into Big Bend, this long right-hander that brings you onto the run to the hairpin. Josh Rogers able to eke out a 10 or so car length advantage. They screen down into the second hard braking zone and the lap hard on the brakes, and Sebastian Job closes in, but not nearly close enough. The fight's on in the back, though, for 5th on back. I think that's Team Redline Orange fighting with, no, that's not BS Competition, that's AAA, I believe they're fighting with.
They've got AAA Esports Black just behind them. They've got MSI Esports just in front. Gianni Vecchio looking to the outside there, down in turn 7. But look at that, a big move by Faber Casabon as they came down into the corner. They all stay single file for the moment as they now work themselves down towards Cunningham Corner. Fantastic start to this race. Even down your field, you note the fact that SimRC.de Titan are going side by side and running Sim Sports, and even more battling going on right down at the rear of your field. But out front, we go on board with Sebastian Job in the number 2 Red Bull Racing Esports car as they head out of Le Mans corner for that first time. And a slowdown penalty for Seb. And, well, that's going to drop him down towards the rear outside of your top 5, Randy. Not a good start, not a good opening lap there by Sebastian Job.
Yeah, that's a disaster. You can't let that happen under any circumstance on the opening lap. If you need to be a little bit calm, go ahead and do that, but we know that the slowdown penalties on the opening lap, they tend to be a little bit more severe than they do later on because, of course, the cars are more stacked up. You can potentially gain more by trying to cut the track, so you do get a slightly more severe penalty for these guys. So now, for Josh Rogers, that's going to gift them nearly a full 1 second advantage over who's going to be Max Benecke and Lauren Heinrich in that BS Competition car running well here. Will, like you said, sort of on that team debut, currently running 3rd after that mistake from Red Bull.
Yeah, and it's a look on board right now with Max Benecke as they head themselves through Big Ben down towards the hairpin for lap number 2. Superlatica running along the top of your screen. The gap is about a second as they head themselves through the hairpin for the second time in this race. Fangio and Cunningham Corner are coming up next. And there is, just behind, Lauren Heinrich in the BS Competition car. Of course, we've seen Lauren Heinrich being involved with Williams Esports for so many years, running a new entry here for these BMW SIM 120 Cup events. It's got a team stacked with firepower. That's the most amazing thing here, Randy. So that they immediately are on pace as they are just about 6 times per second right now behind Team Redline Blue as they head through the 2 kinks at Bishop and on the run for the chicane towards Le Mans.
Yeah, I mean, BS Competition, they sort of got a couple of the biggest names really in sim racing. It's both Lauren Heinrich and Alexander Voss who are going to be the 2 drivers doing battle for them today. And That's two very talented drivers. I remember once upon a time that those were a pair of guys that were at the top level of sim racing, fighting out for a championship in 2016 that they came up 2 points short on, all the way back when they were Core Motorsports. There was, of course, Core Motorsports and Core Sim Racing. Luckily, that commentator confusing scenario has gone away in recent years. But yeah, those two guys still very quick, and it's going to be fun watching them work with a new organization.
As we just saw a replay's coming up even of the Tobias College Company, as they are the second team to really be busted by these slowdown penalties through the chicane. And Randy, it's through the chicane section down at turn 15 that these drivers get themselves a slowdown penalty. So they're not waiting until they get onto the back straightaway. It's literally 4 wheels over the curb at any point, basically from the exit of Bishop through to the exit of Le Mans Corner.
Yeah, there's a couple spots as you go through Bishop where it can be really easy, especially when you're in the pack wheel and there's a bunch of cars behind you. As we come back to live pictures, it can be really easy to just dip that car over the curbs, and because you're sight unseen, you got 20-30 cars in front of you potentially. You might it's easy to misjudge it. That's why it's such an uncharacteristic mistake to see that happen from Red Bull Racing Esports. Only have one car out in front of them, and they make that mistake. As we look at the 211, currently 6th place running car, and as they head now in towards Tower Corner, this is a fantastic corner. One of my favorite probably in the entire world, honestly. That little right-hand dip, it may not look fun, but the transition from surfaces and the bumps, I love getting cars hooked up through that right-hander to sling them on the short chute into Bishop.
And we talk about the BMW SIM 120 Cup event, but also we're going to consider why these events are as they are. And it's because of the fact that all these events align to what BMW Motorsport are doing in racing around the world. Of course, I'll be taking part in the 12 hours of Sebring. And you're right, the amount of cars I've seen in history, Randy, just bin it by getting a little bit too loose through Tower Corner. On paper, it's a simple 90-degree right-hand corner. In reality, it is anything but.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a right-hander like you said. It's got a little bit of banking into it, and you kind of drop into the banking, almost in some ways similar to the carousel at the Nürburgring. You just sort of drop down into it. It's not super, it's just enough that it really upsets the car, and it's sort of a transition in surfaces. Of course, old surfaces are always a talking point at Sebring, as I believe last time this was paved was around the time the asteroid hit that killed the dinosaurs, is when this track was last resurfaced. But you have just that little dip and you're transitioning from sort of asphalt to concrete to asphalt, and that means that if you have any balance issues with that car, as you turn the car in, if you have any slide, when you get onto the concrete, it's going to make that slide a lot worse. As we watch AAA Esports trying to pressure the cars in front of them, the likes of, this Team Redline Orange, trying to work on MSI Esports in front.
But on the rear of that picture, we go on board with Sebastian Job, and he was the driver who, of course, on lap number 1, lost 2nd place and fell down into 7th as they work now through Collier Corner, turn number 11, down towards Tower Corner once again. Seb, I always get into trouble when I make these bold, sweeping statements about drivers and the fact that, there's a pattern of behaviour. But on lap number 1, Sebastian Job on forced error. Now I'm hoping to see the other side of Seb, who is an amazing charger when he can just put his head down and turn laps. And hopefully he's got Graham Carroll working with him on this race to coach him. And the good thing about this race, the good thing about this series actually, because it is a team event, you not only have just a couple of drivers running in it, we'll have all the driver coaches, all of the strategists behind the scenes doing the work as well. And that's what makes a sim racing team event so exciting.
Yeah, it is. And you talk about pattern of behavior. I don't think that's an unfair characteristic to make, as we're going to see we're going to see Johnny here take a look up on MSI as they go through turn 1. Difficult corner to go side by side in, but both of them going to manage it well. MSI just about has the advantage, but look at the 72 deep on the brakes into turn 3, and they're going to get that job done. Great move there by Johnny Vecchio, and now in the background, Sebastian trying to set moves up as well as they come on to Big Bend once again here, working lap 5.
As what it's done is allowed all this group to bunch back up together, and it's given now the opportunity for Seb to look it down the inside. It's a traffic jam here in Florida, and Seb is going to have to now run the outside line the inside line actually through Fangio, so he's got himself now past the AAA Esports Black car. AAA Esports Black now under pressure by Anchen Couven in the number 73 Team Redline Black car, who of course has spent his life running in GT racing, and Couven running himself around the outside as they come in towards Tower Corner. They've been side by side for almost 6 corners now, and I don't think anything's going to give on the way down into Bishop. They stay side by side as they work through Bishop down towards Le Mans once again, and it's just the fact that you can't really run too wide through turn number 15 that they got single file, but again Couven immediately on the exit of Le Mans back down to the inside, and that's bunched everyone up behind them. Couven's got themselves the inside line into Sunset Bend.
One of these AAA cars actually got a slowdown working their way into Le Mans, so that's, I believe, the 3rd or 4th victim we've seen already. Is still Couven able to just get clear, but watch the cutback. You can make a couple lines work. Coming off the Sunset in the 211, able to just about get set up. A little bit of blocking here from Couven. This is going to get a little bit dicey into turn 1 because the 211 does not want to give up, but Couven is going to have the spot here as they run through towards turns 2 and 3. That 211 car is now going to be locked behind.
I tell you what, if you're going to talk about the two Team Redline, well, the many Team Redline drivers who also race in the quote-unquote real world, Anchen Couven on a race like this, on a narrow track like this, Randy, would be my pick, because with all of his GT racing experience, he knows exactly how to push, how to go side by side in a way that, quite simply, you cannot do in a Formula car. And I think there, the last half a lap, we saw a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I mean, with all experience, he better be able to execute well here, because he's pretty much the cork in the bottle right now. He's leading this entire queue of cars. He's a little bit wide down here to the right-hander, and as they come into tower, this is going to stack him up. Once again, the 211 wide on track's right, goes off onto the grass, trying to find any opening. See the headlights are flashing there on the 211 car, so Thibaut Casabon not having a ton of fun, but look at the queue of cars behind this number 73 wheel. Any mistake, and he's going to drop a ton of positions.
He did make a mistake actually into Cunningham Corner. We just saw the car just touch the grass a little bit, just get himself a little bit sideways. He was able to get it back on track through Corner. Ironically, the way the car would have normally spun is the direction you need to travel through the next corner. So Couven was lucky there, but we're on board right now with Augustin Canapino in the number 86 car as they work down in towards Sunset Bend. Right behind, they've got Kager Schub as they work now through Sunset Bend and out of Sunset Bend as well. Should we go back to your leader just for a moment? That is Josh Rogers. That is the gap. It is 1.7 seconds right now between Koana Sim Sports and Team Redline Blue. And Randy, I say the first couple of moments of the year, it's like the first couple of minutes in a WrestleMania match. You're not actually doing anything. All you're doing is just psyching out your opposition. And in this Koana Sim Sport versus Team Redline battle, it seems to be that Koanda put all their big guns, put a lot of effort into the start of the season to try and demoralize Team Redline and, of course, their merger with Pure Racing Team that happened at the start of the year, to just try and say, guys, we're still here.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good thing. I've always been a believer in sim racing and in the concept of momentum. It seems to be, you know, whether it's about a year-long window or 2-year-long window, those who start getting rolling and, you know, start doing well tend to do so. I think back to even last year in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series, we saw it with Ryan Luza. He won 3 races out of, I think, the first 6, and then didn't manage to pick up another win the entire rest of the season. He just got on the back foot and never got that momentum going again. So yeah, that's incredibly important. I think on top, it's just as important as the talent of your drivers to be on the right side of luck and have the right momentum going forward at all times getting through the year. And it's fun watching that change over the years and see the different different teams come out as the teams to beat as years go by.
And it's really fascinating to see. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, we had a conversation on one of these long 24-hour broadcasts. We see a four-way battle going on right now. This looks like the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Like Barrichello down to the wall there. Oh my word, that's Moritz Lohner, trouble, free car impact there, and that is going to be Moritz Lohner going very wide down at Sunset Bend. And well, the joking for a moment stops as we get the replay up here, Randy.
Yeah, this was always going to happen. I mean, these guys were fanning out nearly 4 wide, 5 wide, and Maurice being maybe a little bit over-aggressive, trying to lock down that bottom line. I think Maurice, this early in a race, I don't think he needs to be trying to chop the nose of that BMW like that and blocking him down to the inside wall, Will. I don't know if he got a horrible exit coming off of that final corner, but there's no reason to be doing this. You have 2 hours left to go, and you're risking potentially slinging this car into the wall, potentially forcing that car on the inside to make a mistake, which is exactly what happened. And when the car on the inside, Will, makes a mistake and doesn't see the brake marker, and you put them in that situation, that means they're running directly into you, and that's never a situation you want to put people in.
Yeah, and shades of Schumacher Barrichello, the Hungaroring, of course, there. But the lane that's on the ultra inside at Sebring, there's almost a gentleman's code, Randy. That is for one thing and one thing only. Those poor people who's had to slow a third down penalty on the exit on the wrong corner, they go down to the inside, that's where you serve the penalty. It's not technically a racing line. At the end of a race, we do see people go down there to try and make a move, but the issue is, if you are on the ultra inside line, the angle into Sunset Bend is so shallow that you're never really going to make it work anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult situation, but I mean, to a certain extent, I think that car got forced down there. They were fairly alongside, and there's not much really you can do, and I don't think you should really lift out of that situation as well. I think it's just, at the end of the day, it's hard racing, but I think Kei Kichube definitely put that car in a little bit of a harder situation than it needed to be put in. But that said, checking back in with the Team Redline Black car and Guven still leading this little bit of a train of cars, but Redline Black and AAA have a little bit of breakaway from the likes of the pair of Williams Esports cars back there, and then another AAA and another Williams cars. So it's just a bunch of AAA and Williams cars in this part of the track right now being led by Guven.
Yeah, as we go a little bit further up in the field, there is Gianni Vecchio in the Team Redline orange car. And the point, there's a couple of points I was trying to make actually, but the first one was the fact that Team Redline at the same time, they have come into 2020 with a huge wave of momentum. We cannot forget that. With the partnership they've now got and the merger of themselves and majority of the drivers from a pure racing team, what that's meant is that Team Redline for the first time in a long time have put themselves at the top of the sim racing mountain on iRacing across multiple series, because I know that Dom Duham will come back and say, do you not remember that 24 hours of Spa race? But they are now again a consistent participant at the top level, Randy, which was one of the things that Team Redline might not have been able to do as frequently in years past on iRacing. But now, I mean, when's the last time we saw 4 competitive Team Redline cars in a big event?
It's been years. I mean, obviously it's been since about 2019. They've made those deals, and actually, to their credit, Will, I know you and I have both kind of been critical of them in the past, like, oh, they've just got a bunch of real drivers that don't really race. Now with both Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, that's sort of the opposite problem. They've pulled in a couple of big names that race really actively for them and are performing quite well, and of course won the 24 Hours of Spa last year. But I mean, you're right, up until 2019 and the merger and bringing in Lando and Max and bringing in the entire Pure Racing team group into the fold as well, it was really rare to see the Redline cars out at the head of the endurance races. I think it was the 28 Daytona 24. They had a couple of their guys. They were kind of leading in a prototype before they got unfortunately taken out due to some traffic. And before that, I almost have to think all the way back to the Masters of Endurance back in like 2014 when it was one of them would put the car on pole, and then one of their drivers would inevitably wreck it. They had pole position literally every race and didn't finish a single one from what I recall nearly 5 or 6 years ago. But it's great to see them move on past just Gregor pretty much dominating in the old F1 World Championship and now become a full force across the sim racing side of the iRacing side of things as a whole.
Yeah, and you want to talk about the comparisons, of course. Kiwana Sim Sports have done that as well. We go back to the start of Kiwana Sim Sport, and when they essentially devolved themselves away from 3D gaming, it was the Hugo Louis show, and then it became the Martin Kroenke show, and then over the time it's become, Josh Rogers established himself at the front of that team. But depth in numbers seems to be the big thing in 2020, and I think that's going to be the trend that we're likely to see moving forward, because there is more prize money involved. And go back to my other point, I mean, let's be honest here, Randy. Two huge sponsors already we've talked about in 2020. Coca-Cola in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola NASCAR series, but then also Dazn as well with the BS competition car. Of course, they are one of the world's biggest streaming services. So there's that whole thing. We've got cord cutting going on across the world, but a lot of these streaming services, a lot of these companies are realizing that the future of their brands is essentially through online competition. And all that's going to mean is that there's more money coming into sim racing, which is what I know there's been people talking about for the last 10 odd years. But I think now is that time, again, with a number of major manufacturers as well, including BMW, the second year in a row, putting so much energy into sim racing. For these drivers, what had become a hobby has now become an alternate opportunity to get into essentially 24/7 motorsport.
Yeah, and it's such a fun thing to watch, and it's starting to affect not only just, it started out with the NASCAR stuff and with the road stuff kind of at the same time. It kind of happened from separate parties at once. You had BMW come in, of course, and all the support they've given. And recently we've been seeing big effort shown on the dirt oval side as well. Wicked Cushion doing their esports championship series with a bunch of live events. We had that first one of those at Racing Extravaganza in Pennsylvania just about a month and a half ago. But you mentioned a lot of these big sponsors. Well, another one that comes to mind is VRS. A lot of people see VRS as the racing school, but VRS does a ton to support this. And like you said, you mentioned the Martin Kroenke and Hugo used to kind of be the Kiwana Sim Sports show. They've really expanded beyond that, not only just on the road side, but you look what they've done on the oval side as well. They now have a team in that eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series, and with Bobby Zielinski and Ray Alfala, two of the biggest names on the oval side of things, they've really expanded into that category as well. So Virtual Racing School, one of the oldest sponsors we've seen. They've been supporting Kiwana for about 4 or 5 years now, I believe, and they're pretty much just as up there and just making the same big moves as everyone.
Just to let you know, one retiree so far today, and that is the Tavares company car that we saw in the 4-car incident early on. 4 cars we now pit road for repairs or something so far in this race. They are Schubert Motorsports, Optimal Sim Racing Red, German Sim Racing.de, and the Rapido Sim Racing Team number 16 car, the top 8 there at the bottom of your screen. And well, this is a very different picture to what we saw at Daytona, Randy, where we had essentially a fuel saving race for the first 65 plus minutes. Here today, with that long pace car lap, I was worried that a lot of people would be saving fuel early on here, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Everyone going flat out, and the big difference from that is, of course, compared to Daytona, you're not full throttle for as much of the lap, and that means that these cars will burn a little bit more fuel.
Yeah, well, a little bit less fuel, but you're right. I mean, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. You just contradicted yourself. It's fine. But you're right. The cars aren't going to be nearly as sensitive on the fuel load. And, the long pace lap can maybe make that a little bit of a problem, but it's not going to be a huge thing. We normally see cars here at Sebring able to go the hour pretty easily. Maybe you save a little bit in the first start of this stint. But after that, you're pretty much going to be foot to the floor and you're going to be flat out for the entirety of this event. It is just sort of the nature of a 2-hour race. Unless there's a fuel problem, you're not going to have too much strategy. I'm probably expecting, even with these conditions. Actually, I don't know, Will. Sebring tends to be abrasive. You think we're going to see tires at the pit stop sequence, or you think guys are going to skip them? It's hard to say. We've seen kind of different things. I know in the Daytona 24 that we had, even in the official one, there was sort of mixed strategy, and in the daylight hours they were taking tires basically, I think it was every other stop, but once the sun went down and the track got cool, there were guys pushing 3-4 stints on the same sets of tires across the different categories. I'm not really sure.
There we are, 32 degrees is the track temperature right now. That's 90 degrees centigrade Fahrenheit.
Relatively mild.
It is, and what that will essentially mean is I think we're at a crossover period in terms of whether or not people will take tyres or not. And that's what's going to make this race really interesting, because the track conditions was 10 degrees Fahrenheit higher, everyone would take tyres. If it was 5 degrees lower, no one would take tyres. So I think this has become a pure strategy race in some regards, Randy. And I think that some of these teams have realised that early. That's the reason why we're not seeing that much passing. Now the field has got themselves spread out. There's a tiny bit of fuel saving going on. He's going on board the AAA Esports white car. He's behind the Williams Esports race car, as they say.
Oh, well, I'm going to interrupt you. We got to fight for third.
Yeah,
we got to fight for third. Red Bull on BS.
Yep, there we are, and we saw them just change positions a moment ago. Let's put the... Actually, we're going to stay on this one live for the moment. Go on board with BS Competition, and Red Bull Racing Esports, without us realising, Randy, up into third place. And Seb is doing exactly what we said about 10 minutes ago, what he needed to do. Put his head down, get us some positions up, and this is a Seb that we love to see in sim racing.
Yeah, he needs to keep this up as well. He's only about 5 seconds off currently your leader. As we're going to get a replay here. You see him up the inside at the hairpin, and decisive move here from Sebastian Job. He's been the quickest car on the racetrack for the last couple of laps. Last trip around the racetrack, he did a 55.5. Josh Rogers did a 55.8. He's currently leading, of course. Max Benecke a 55.9. So there's been a couple of big laps here from Seb. He has the potential speed to get this done, but he needs to keep doing this consistently. That said, he's driving away from Lauren Heinrich right now on the BS competition number 089. You're going to see that car slowly get smaller and smaller in that rear view camera, I think, with the sort of pace Seb is doing, but it's going to be a long while. Actually, that said, if he can kind of keep this window up of 3, 4, 5 tenths a lap, Will, about 15 laps potentially, we could potentially be on your leaders. And that'll probably be right around the pit stop window. And
it will come down to, again, who's the better through the stages of the race, through pit entrance, pit exit, and through that pit stop itself. And it will, in some part, come down to tyre changing. And again, one thing that's worth noting, of course, Randy, is that this is a team race. And normally, you wouldn't give a teammate a set of tyres that are partially worn. But we are talking about some of the best, as well, just apologies, ladies and gentlemen. We had some technical glitches there for us. But we wouldn't normally expect to see a team change over and keep old tyres on. But we are talking about some of the best sim racers in the world here. And they have, by virtue of getting that title,
was still the quickest of your top three after making that pass. And that last trip around the racetrack, he was 2 tenths quicker than your current leading car. So even though things are spread out at the moment, there is sort of a slow burn happening here to this race getting really interesting in about 20 minutes time.
As we go on board on Heinrich, you can see the gap already down to 1.1 seconds. We've been losing time, actually, lap on lap on lap over Seb in that Red Bull Racing Esports car. And you've got to remember, actually, we go back to qualifying, that your top 3 drivers were separated by half a second, and then there was a big gap between everyone else behind that. But it seems to be that now the top 3 are the same top 3 that they were at the start of this race, albeit with some positions changed. Now they're going to try and pull away again, and the battle that we're going to look outside of that is P4, 5, 6, but only the top 3 will pay prize-paying positions here today.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's definitely going to be what we're keeping a pretty close eye on. And the way it's forming up, we might get those 3 pretty close by the end of the race. Of course, the other fight to look at, Will, is, you know, your leaders and whatnot are pretty spread out, and we're basically just comparing lap times. Is the fight for 7th on back, because Guven, we saw him make those big moves, Will, and he hasn't really been able to stretch a gap. He's still got 3 cars, AAA Esports, Williams Esports, BenQ, and Williams Esports Chill Blast, all lined up right behind him as they work now towards the Le Mans sector of the racetrack and come down this long back straightaway. These guys still all over the top of each other. So you think back about, you know, what has it been, 10 laps or so since we've seen Guven make that big aggressive move up the inside, and it hasn't really paid off because he hasn't been able to break away from this group the way he would have wanted to.
Now, the interesting factor of this race will be potentially as well, if Team Redline Blue win this race. They are technically under a different team name, but it'll be interesting to note what will happen in terms of punching a ticket to Munich, because Max Benecke is already qualified to go to Munich at the end of the year. And the assumption that Benecke is partnering with Wenig in this race as well, then if they do win, then Coanda would still, by virtue, if they were to fall back to second, would still get themselves to Munich at the end of the year. That's a quirk of the rules, because there was a recognition that...
Who did he run with for Daytona?
It was Max Wenig.
Okay, well, they're both currently signed into the car right now, but though Patrick Pichler has joined the server for that team as well.
So that could be interesting. And again, we are both rule book specialists, but whether Pichler will get himself an invite by himself, whether or not they classify as a team as Benecke already qualifying, we need to try and work that one out. But if they do win this race to Red Line Blue, then there is a chance that the position to go to Munich might go to the second place team if Benecke, etc. wins this race. They are currently second, however, and they are currently about 2.4 back from Team Redline, and that is something that we are going to have to keep an eye out on. Sorry, we have just got some more technical glitches going on there.
Yeah, I'm seeing what you're seeing, Will. I've had experience with that as well, and it tends to last for a couple seconds and then goes away.
Yeah, but there we are. We can show you now that gap again, hopefully. Nope, we can't.
Jinxed it.
Yeah, jinxed it again. There we are. Let's go back to Team Redline Black instead, shall we? With Anchen Gouven in that number 73 car. I tell you what, it would be very entertaining, shall we say, to see Team Redline Black and Anchen Gouven in particular going to an end-of-year event sanctioned by BMW, Randy.
Yeah, I think it'd be really entertaining to watch as well, and I'm sure that Dom wouldn't be opposed to having multiple Redline cars go in there, but this entire little quartet of cars goes through turn number one, and it's kind of interesting, Will, the way this race has sort of calmed down. You know, that first opening stint, we were seeing 2 wide, 3 wide, even nearly 4 wide when we saw that big incident with Kei Kashubi down towards the entry to turn number 17, but after that sort of initial volley of passing and hard racing, this has really spread out the entire field. There's a couple long trains of cars. There's another one that starts about 11th on back, but besides that, everything is really strung out at the moment. It's just all about waiting for this first round of stops.
Yeah, we just check in with Radicals and Lion, Ross Woodford, the number 122 car. And I talked about this as I ran through the qualifying results, Randy. This team has been stuck through so much, and I say the last couple of years, I forget actually from the last 3 or 4 years now, Radicals and Lion, but they're inside the top 20 with Ross Woodford behind the wheel of the car. They've got themselves a gaggle of cars ahead of them, actually. It starts with BMW SIM Racing Blue and Attica Negotia as they head themselves now through Tower Corner. But for Radicals and Lion, this is a good run by them in P16. We, of course, used to see them so much higher up through the field, but when you're in that rebuild phase, to have a solid top 20 knocking the door for a top 15 position, not a bad start to this race here by Radicals and Lion.
Yeah, they're doing well. They're up a couple of spots, like you said, still running 16th, and they're actually just ahead of a Quena Sinsport car that's not qualified that well. Started 26th and currently up to 17th. Pash Gerga is currently behind the wheel of that car. But, you know, Radicals has been in this weird phase for what seems like 3 or 4 years now. Well, we've been talking about them, you know, rebuilding, but they just quite haven't gotten the momentum underneath them that I would have liked to see. And you know, one of the traits that I think will of a team that's struggling is just a bunch of new names coming in, and it just seems like there's not a lot of the familiar names that we're used to seeing at Radicals. It's like every time I join a server and they're running in the race, it's like it's got a completely new, different lineup of drivers that I've never seen before. The only driver that I'm used to seeing there that's really been there for like a decade now is Paul Ilbrink, who's connected to the server for this group. But it's good to always see that team out there and running well, but it's unfortunate that they've been sort of on the back foot the last, let's say, I don't know, it's been 3 or 4 years at least now.
You talk about a driver carousel. And of course, all forms of motorsports has a driver carousel that happens in the off-season. Sim racing, Randy, is one of those that the driver carousel isn't a carousel. It's more like a theme park for all the changes and differences and things that happen to try and surprise you. Of course, the big one in 2020 was the Team Red Lion and Pure Racing Team, which in some ways we kind of expected after they had that showing at Bathurst just over 12 months ago, and then of course again stuff going on at Spa 6 months ago. But the driver carousel on sim racing is one that, if you are a casual fan, can be hard to keep up with, even if you are not a casual fan and you're someone that does this almost full time, it can still be tough to keep up with. As in the rear, Fatal Casabon, as he's got Augustin Canapino in the Williams Esports BenQ car, who's the first Williams Esports car in this race running a P9.
Yeah, Williams definitely not having the sort of run they would like, but Augustin running decently well in 9th and Keisha in 10th as well. As these guys now work through Sunset and get ready to scream onto the front straight. But you're right, it can be pretty difficult to follow, especially when you're trying to follow all the different sort of series and whatnot we do, Will. It's not like it's just, say, these 48 teams or 49 cars, 49 teams that we cover. There's, all sorts of teams that we see cycle through over the year, and of course the oval side as well. It can get really difficult to track where people are moving, where they're going, and I think you're right. I think the theme park comparison is fair.
As we go a little bit back up towards the front of your field, there is your race leader. That is Josh Rogers. Let's run a lap on board of him. Let's give you some RaceSpot TV fan immersion on board your race leading car. Rogers looking strong out front in this race. You just made a point, Randy, whilst we were off there. For the first time in a while, Deb has not been the fastest of your top three drivers.
Yeah, that very last lap around the racetrack, you're in a 56.1. Josh Rogers a 56 flat, and Max Manecki had a 56.2. So these guys still very close to one another, Will, and the gap for second and third coming down a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see. Maybe Coanda has a little bit of an advantage in the last 20 or so minutes of the run on the tires. Of course, that's kind of common to see as a run goes on in these sorts of sports cars, that you can see tire advantages kind of come and go. That said, the last trip around the racetrack, he has since reclaimed that berth.
AAA Esports Black, Fatal Casabon on board of him, running in P number 8 on track. and he's got himself Team Redline back and Chungu Ven just ahead of him, but also just behind, he's got himself the BMW BenQ car of Augusto Canapino. Keeping an eye out on this one over the last couple of laps. It seems to me this is where the quote-unquote train is in this event. 3 or 4 cars separated by nothing. Their kind of lap times are really close together. So that's what your first train really is in this event. You've got your second one, which is down P number 10, 11, 12, 13 actually, which is AAA Esports White, Apex Racing Team doing Fluke on board of him right now. And then also you've got yourself Williams Esports Razor and Josh Thompson just ahead of him. We're going to take a quick moment to step aside, ladies and gentlemen, here on Racesport TV and on the iRacing Esports Network. We'll be back in just a couple of moments' time.
Assist to the front bumper, and he hits him again now. Ray Alfala into the outside wall.
He's going to pass nearly 3 cars down that front straightaway, and he's going to get them all done with. What amazing!
Lee to the inside goes Logan Cloudman is going to touch in. Pit press sideways. What a save!
Look to the outside as Tronke goes off. De Jong into second place.
I'm going for the switchback. Oh, pinpoint driving.
It's Howley down to the inside.
Trying this contact though.
Slide left of the racetrack. Chris Leonard drives it back down underneath, and he takes that second spot right back. Joker goes to Garrett Lowe.
Garrett Lowe should take victory with all that contact. He's going to try and make the move around the upset the Paravolca. That's not going to work, but he's going to try and get the cutback here. Get the run out the Paravolca. That's beautifully done there. Makashube, there's a little bit of door banging as well.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for that. We just had ourselves a couple of quick technical issues. We tried to get ourselves through, but we are back live here at Sebring as we are still racing. We got ourselves just under an hour and 17 minutes worth of this race to go. Brother SimSport still leading the way. Team Redline Blue second. Red Bull Racing Esports in third place. And you made that point over last lap times. Well, once again, last time by Randy, it was Red Bull Racing Esports and Sebastian Job who were the fastest out on track.
Yeah, and you look at the gap right now, Will, second and third. It's not just looking at the gap in terms of time. They are visually closer to one another. 0.7 of a second between Team Redline Blue and Red Bull Racing Esports. So Sebastian Job, as he comes up to this final end of the stint, really closing in on this second place fight. Now the question is, if you're Sebastian Job here, Will, do you try to fight this fight, or do you just sit there for a little bit, knowing that you're not that much quicker than Max Maneke, and try to make the jump in the pit road?
Yeah, that's going to be the interesting thing to note, because we are only about a quarter of an hour away from that first and only pit stop taking place. And again, this is a team race here at Sebring. So these drivers will have to get out of their car, hand themselves over to someone else. And in terms of Red Bull Racing Esports, it'd be, I assume, Graham Carroll who'll be taking over for Seb in the number 2 car.
Patrick Colesman. He's the only one on the server.
It is Patrick Colesman who's taking over him in that number 2 car. Greg Howard does a lot of the work behind the scenes, of course, at the Red Bull Racing Esports organization, through Le Mans corner, down into that back trail. The thing is, though, as we're on board for him, I couldn't even see Josh Rogers down this long back straightaway. As we just turn our camera over, and you notice that is how big the gap is. And Josh Rogers is already through Sunset Bend before these drivers even enter it. And that 3.7 seconds of a gap right now is starting to build up. And of course, for Coanda, they really want to win this race, because if they do so, they are guaranteed that trip to Munich in December. You, of course, compare that with Team Red Line Blue, Beneke in particular, who has already punched his ticket down to Munich in December. So whilst, of course, Team Red Line would love the $1,200 per driver, they're also thinking, well, we've already got our ticket to go. Any money is good money at that stage, right?
I don't think Max is thinking about that at all, and I don't think Holzman will be either. They're just going to want to go out there and get the best result they can, and if that's a win, then that's what they're going to be able to go with. That said, Will, it's going to be really interesting to see, like you said, with newer drivers getting in the car, because they're expecting Patrick Holzman to take over for Sebastian Job. Still unsure and a little bit up in the air for who's going to do it for Max Beneke. We're probably expecting Max Weneg, although Weneg is not actually even connected to the server. Patrick Pichler is the only one connected to the server for that group, though he might just be doing a quick refresh before getting in. It's not uncommon to see a lot of drivers do that, especially if they race in VR, or maybe they didn't have their wheels synced up because they knew they were going to be spectating. About 10 minutes before pit stops, it's not uncommon to see a bunch of drivers disconnect and then reconnect to the session and then see those in the car. But it's going to be a big ask for those guys, Will, because we're expecting Mitchell de Jong to be the driver replacing Mr. Josh Rogers once the pit stop cycle comes through. As that's an early stop there for the number 45, or excuse me, for the 15.
Yeah, that is the number 15 car, Sim Racing Klapida, as they are taking tires. They're taking a full service here.
73 minutes.
Yeah, so that is going to be a very early stop for them. DRS Wave Italy, a little bit further ahead in our field, are battling out with another Coanda car. It's number 8 machine, Riccardo Castrolado just ahead. And well, for DRS Wave Italy, they've got Giuseppe Curry behind the wheel right now, number 10 car, as they head themselves out of Tower Corner. They run through down to Le Mans, the double apex on the left-handers here, as then through the right-hander, and then into the left as they come down in towards turn number 16. Where you got to be careful, of course. We saw the slowdown penalties happen early to a couple of drivers, and the gap is about static at 4 tenths per second. Now, the thing about this track here, Randy, compared to what we've seen at others, is the fact that there are different downforce levels that you can employ on these BMWs, BMW M8. So remember, we commentated a race in another series once where downforce levels and fuel consumption, everything all came together at points in the race. But a good run by DRS Wave Italy. So they have the inside line into turn number 1. They're going to make that pass happen then, because they're Curry up into 29.
Yeah, I think talking about fuel flow and downforce levels and dirty air, I think that's probably something you and I are uniquely qualified with, Will, for all of our IndyCar experience, because let's be real, any IndyCar broadcast is just basically a big debate on what aerodynamic settings people are using and how they're going to do in the dirty air, especially on the shorter ovals. But you're right, Sebring's kind of a unique track. When you go to Daytona, you're basically going to be lowering that rear end as low as you can. You're going to have that rear wing probably flattened out. Same with Le Mans. But here at Sebring, you're probably going to want that rear wing relatively high, maybe setting 4, setting 5. But what you do with that rear ride height is going to be really important, not only for the rear downforce, but just the standard rear grip as well, just in terms of the rake. Of course, you bring that rear end up, and that car will get a lot more aggressive, not only in the higher speed sectors, but with generating a lot more front aero, but it's going to generate a lot more, of course, just weight forward. That's going to make the car a little bit more snappy and a little bit more oversteery, which might make it a little bit of a handful in the slower corners. You bring that rear ride height down, car's going to squat a little bit more, not only on the straightaways, making it a little bit slipperier, but it's going to be tightened up as well in the slower corners, just as that weight distribution is moved more over towards the rear axle.
Yeah, as we are just paying attention actually to Williams Esports Shieldglass car, as just going on board with them, and you make a good point there, Randy, because of the fact that not only will it change the way the car handles, but of course that would also impact a little bit in terms of the grip that they have, and therefore how much tyre usage they use. We talked about tyre usage a little bit earlier on about these drivers maybe double stinting within the kind of weather window to enable you to double stint these cars, as it's not perfectly bright out there. It's not hailing like it is down in the UK when we've been dancing around the idea of snow. Talking of which, I do actually remember seeing a race a couple of weeks ago down at Road to Mountain where it was absolutely snowing. And of course, these BMWs, was it last year? Was it at the Spa 6 hours? They had a little bit of snow. They've had some snow at the Nürburgring the last couple of hail rather than snow.
Yeah, the ice, I think it was 3 years ago now at the Nürburgring, where they basically had cars stopped around the entire track.
That was insane, that race. But here today, it's like Florida weather, but it's not the warmest Florida weather, as we're on board with Kei Kashubi right now, and the tyre usage with all these different settings will be another thing the drivers will factor in, because they're often after two things. They're after a fast lap time and a delta lap time. Fast lap time, essentially, as you can imagine, is how fast can you go around the lap, but a delta lap time is how consistent can you be over the course of a run, over the course of a couple of stints, and the top teams in particular, not actually running to a fast lap time, they're actually running to predicted delta time ranking, and that's what they'll base a lot of their decision making on.
Yeah, it's a little bit, maybe for a lot of newer members and, people kind of newer to racing, it's like, well, don't you want to just build the car to go out there and go as fast as possible? And the answer is sort of yes, but the way you get there isn't always consistent. Of course, yeah, it's easy to, you can potentially build a car to go really, really fast, but if after 8 laps, 10 laps, you burn off the tires to the tune of about 8/10 of the lap, of course, in these cars, you're not going to see anywhere near that amount of drop off. Some of the other cars, though, 8/10 of a lap over 10, 15 laps is pretty common. What you want to do is, even if you take a couple tenths out of that ultra potential fast lap time, if you can stay within that lap time closer to 2/10, 3/10, it's going to be a much, much better situation for you over the long run of a race. And on top of that, the car's probably just going to feel better as well, Will. I think, everyone's done it where they've had a car that's fast in the early run that burns the tires up to about 7 or 8/10 of a second off that ultra speed. What tends to happen is that those cars tend to be a complete pain in the butt to drive. They tend to be understeery. They tend to be oversteery as the tires kind of come and go over the course of the run. And it's a lot more work trying to get that, 7 or 10s off your best lap than it is to have maybe the slightly slower setup that's more consistent. The car tends to be an absolute beauty to drive.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the things that's the difference as you move up the categories in iRacing. Start with the shorter races, then moving yourself into hour-long races, and then, of course, a lot of these drivers into more endurance-style racing. And you're right.
Oh, the fight for second.
There is.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Talk about it.
Oh, well, I was getting ready to bring up after your point, actually. This duo, second and third, has been 5 to 6/10 per lap slower than your race leader. And Sebastian Job just basically letting Max Benecke sit out in front of him as they run through turn one. I think Seb is getting held up a little bit here, Will, but he doesn't want to get too aggressive. I think Seb needs to make this move if he feels that it's Max Benecke who's costing him this time, because they're losing way too much time. They've lost about 2 seconds over the last 3 laps.
Yep, as there is Seb, there is Max just setting ourselves there behind the trees, down towards Big Ben. Seb isn't actually close enough as they come into the hairpin down at turn number 7. They're going to have to stay behind as they now work themselves through Fangio on what is essentially their 28th lap around this track, as the Seb car did a 156.4 last time, by 4 seconds per second faster was Commander Supersports. And again, think about this big picture here, Randy. For Team Redline Blue, with Benecke already qualifying from Munich, he's got another role to play, and he can actually determine in some way over the course of this series which teams he wants to hold up more than others, because you can, if you are so fast in all the races this season, try and maybe gently social engineer the people who you're going to be battling with at the end of year sim racing competition, try and reduce that competition level a bit. Now, I'm not saying that they're doing anything deliberate, but there is something any competition, you always want to have your best foot forward.
Well, I'm going to say, Will, if that what he's doing, he's making a huge mistake. Because I'm just going to say it, and you know, it may be a little bit savage. I would rather, if I'm Max Benecke and if I'm in that Team Redline car, I would rather Sebastian Job and Patrick Holzman get the invite as opposed to Josh Rogers and Mitchell DeYoung. Because Josh and Mitchell, I think, have been the duo to beat over the last year or so, at least. Of course, we saw them be dominant in the GT World Championship last year, and we saw both of them be very good in the Porsche Esport in other World Championships as well. That is not the duo that's currently leading this race I would want to see get the invite.
I mean, to be fair though, the Team Redline Blue, those two drivers in particular, Benecke and Rogers, it's a little bit like thinking about Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, or The Rock and Stone Cold. Those two have had some epic encounters over the last couple of years. I will say one thing, Randy. It's quite evident that they don't like each other. And a lot of these drivers from Coanda and Team Redline at the moment don't seem as if they do like each other. And I've got that first-hand experience of delivering driver briefings, working at these live events. You often see the camps developing, and Coanda and Team Redline, they don't get on. And of course, they had a huge moment at the start of one of the endurance races at Sim Racing Expo that takes place in Germany last year, which only soured relations between the two of them even further. And you've got to be frank about it. This is getting into some of the historic rivalries that we used to see in Formula 1, in terms of World Endurance Championship and IMSA racing, happening here on the Sim Racing stage. And there are some people saying, yeah, but this isn't, you know what, it is, and there's some fantastic rivalries that's been developing. Of course, at the top, all the way down this field as well, as we're on board, we're trying to go on board with Seb. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to watch as well and kind of maintain this tire strategy, Will. I think one of these second or third place running cars, they need to pit ASAP, because this tire, I don't know if it's tires or I don't know if it's just that Seb doesn't have the confidence to make the move on Max, but this is an enormous margin that Coanda's getting gifted. And here finally comes the move from Sebastian Job into turn one. He's going to pick that second spot up as they work through turn one, but I think he's waited a little bit too long, or that it's been a while, Will, because there was a couple of laps where it was a full second that second and third place running group lost over Joshua Rogers. It was 0.7 of a second the last trip around the racetrack as well. I mean, you look at those margins lap on lap, the gap has grown from about 3 seconds when those two first came together to now 7.2. And Josh Rogers as well, he has found an enormous amount of speed at the end of the run, Will, that he didn't have early on. It's been about 10 laps since we've seen him start ripping off 55s, and he did one just 2 laps ago after about 10 laps of being stuck in the 56s. So this Coanda car is very good on the old tires, and I think this duo needs to come down pit road soon, as the fight will continue for second. Redline up the inside at Cunningham.
Yeah, and they stay side by side as they head themselves down through Collier in towards Tower Corner. Red Bull just stay ahead, but that deserves a second look, actually. Let's get ourselves one more look at that one for overhead camera here, as this will give you a fantastic look as how this one developed. It all started into Cunningham Corner, the right-hander, as Benecke just storms it down the inside. He's done that so many times in the past and managed to make it stick, almost if that was sighted a little bit there by Red Bull Racing Esports. Holds it well round the outside, and ironically through Collier Corner, Andy. The outside line can be advantageous if you've got the grip on the outside. So it does seem to be a little bit of grip there for the Red Bull Racing Esports team car, but 62 minutes remaining in this event, of course, plus the white flag lap. And the reason why we might not see some people in early is because they have calculated how long that white flag lap might need to be.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. And I don't know, these guys just need to pit ASAP. I'm shocked that neither of them are coming down pit road yet. They should have a complete delta of what the gap is to those cars out in front of them and how much that gap has grown. You see BS Competition coming down on towards pit road, Will, and this is going to be the first indicator of what we might see in terms of, do you guys go for the same set of tires or do they go for the double stint? I'd say looking at some of these deltas, I think some people are going to take tires because the drop-off has been really big at the end of the run.
Yeah, and Alexander Voss getting in behind the wheel of the 089 BS Competition car. We've also got Team Redline Orange on pit road, Team Redline Black on pit road, SimRC.de Titan, Team Redline Green, Rex's Racing on pit road, and many more. We're going to get an indication about tyres about now. 34.3 out and away then from BS Competition. Alexander Voss, they are out and away, and no one in that sequence of pit stops took tyres that time around. In your first 3, 4, 5 drivers to have come out of pit road, no one has taken tyres. Actually, we've got our first one, Alexander Thebe. Looks like he's going to take some tyres then on that Team Redline Green car.
So those guys definitely not feeling confident. It's going to be interesting to see how this definitely pans out for this first group of cars. Of course, many of them race leaders pretty much will, not leading the race per se, but up there in the top 4, top 5. Definitely relevant in the running here and things. So Alexander Voss and, like you said, Alexander Thebe is your race leading cars in. Josh Rogers, 2nd and 3rd, should follow through here. They do not want to let that Coanda car get out there on new tires, and both of them come in behind.
Yep, there is the Red Bull Racing Esports car now, 8.7 seconds further back, and then Team Redline Blue and Max Benecke coming in. We saw some interesting Benecke essentially got himself completely alongside as they came on towards pit road there. I know that's one of the things that they've been talking about in other series about pit management, shall we say. But we're on board the BS Competition car with Alexander Voss. He's the first driver to come out with a fresh set of boots, and now your top 18, Randy, are all on pit road.
Yeah, so now it's just a waiting game. What are people going to do? Waiting to see that Coanda car, of course, about an 8-second lead. We'll get an indication of what they're going to do. They're not going to take tires. They're going to roll out. What are the likes of Red Bull and Redline going to do as they come out here? It seems to be the overwhelming strategy to not take tires, and neither do Redline or Red Bull. They come out together, and they're going to be on top of each other as they go onto the racetrack.
We're looking at Apex Racing Team Jamie Fluke right now, as they are the team that's gone, Randy, 2 laps longer than almost anyone else on track. But it is now a case of Venig versus Holtzman for what will be second place on track once Apex Racing Team come on towards pit road in a moment's time. De Jong is behind the wheel of the number 81 Coanda Simsports car. Race on.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are really doing everything they can they? But man, oh man, I can't believe these guys both went for the no tire call. Will, I thought surely with the drop off that they had that one of them would have taken the risk on the 4-tire call, but everyone pretty much for the most part deciding no tires as Apex Racing Team number 99 comes in. Who was the one team you said who had boots in the kind of in that first group that came on?
That was going to be the BS Competition car. That was the Alexander Voss car. They were the first one. Oh no, sorry, that's Team Redline. Team Redline Green. Team Redline Green. Yeah, Alexander Thebe were the first team who took fuel and tyres, and I'm trying to work out where they are because they are well down the field.
Yeah, I mean, so many cars it seems like took no tires that they've lost a ton of time. They're currently running 40th, so you know, if everyone's planning on taking no tires, there definitely could be track position issues there, Will, with potentially making the decision to not take tires. With that said, I think they were running about mid-pack. Yeah, they were running mid-pack anyway, so it makes sense that they're buried. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this really works out, as that Apex car has come down pit road and is currently exiting the pit lane. So the Coanda Simsport number 81 will inherit that race lead back.
On board with Alexander Voss in the 0889 BS Competition car. MSI Esports and Salva Talent just ahead. So MSI Esports had a good run for the pit stops there, actually, in 4th place. They did themselves a slightly slower pit stop than BS Competition, but we're still able to keep that 4th position on track. Red Bull Racing Esports Holtzman is already past Max Venig just outside of our screens. Let's get ourselves a replay of that one for you. We go on board of Patrick Holtzman. This one's going to be down in towards the hairpin, and Holtzman striking early. And again, not a lot of loss between Team Redline stroke PRT and Rebel Racing Esports and Patrick Holtzman, but Holtzman there just dove it down the inside. Position made down into the hairpin.
Yeah, and Wennig has not given up a lot of time here. He's buried right underneath the rear wing of Patrick Holtzman as they go into Bishop. He's going to be still tucked tightly there. The car stopped on drivers right there in Bishop. Not sure who that was. They've since gotten it off the racetrack, but someone having an issue down at Bishop here relatively recently. Now onto this long back straightaway. Not a great exit for Team Redline Blue, and that should open the door for Holtzman to break away.
Yeah, indeed. As that is now 4/10 of a second gap between the two of them. And of course, this is a narrow racetrack, Randy. So if you have got yourself, you know, a driver stopped on the racetrack, essentially you go from being 2 cars wide from, you know, road marks, road work signs coming out, slow it down, try to avoid all these sorts of things. But the gap actually has come back down. It's down to 0.2 of a second in towards turn number 1. Bennig is not going to allow Holtzman to start pulling away. There's another lap down car just coming out of pit road that almost made that exciting.
Yeah, almost did, but these guys are able to pretty much just slice on through here as you see them into these next couple sequences of corners and off towards Big Bend once again. Yeah, these guys really struggling on these tires, Will. And looking at the lap times, I mean, granted, these guys have been side by side a couple times, but Coanda Sinsport gap now growing to probably about north of 9 seconds, I'd estimate, if they're able to keep this up. They have something cooked up, this Coanda, and how this car treats the tires, because they are flying on the older tires compared to everyone else.
They are. As we go, let's have a look down the field a little bit, because you've got Williams Esports BenQ and Team Redline Orange. Jonas Warnmeyer in the Team Redline Orange car, and you've got yourself Alex Arana in the Williams Esports BenQ car, as they're separated by not much right now as they head themselves down the Collier corner. They've got Apex left-hander. See just how much steering angle there Alex Arana is doing for the centre of the corner. That cost them a couple of tenths of a second there over Jonas Warnmeyer.
Yeah, it does, and that's, you know, not what you want to really be doing there. So not really a great situation for those two as they try to keep things going best they can. We've also had Gregor Hutu check in one of the Team Redline cars, running in Team Redline Black, as he consistently does. But you're right, Alex Ron and Jonas Holmeyer, this is going to be a fun fight to keep an eye on as this one develops.
I should remember the last time we saw Gregor Hutu on one of these live events, and I think it might go back all the way to the ETOG Masters that I last saw him. I'm not sure, unless I saw him at one of the events.
Man, you're really dating yourself with that one.
I am dating myself way back here.
That's what, 2011?
Yeah, quite a good one, by the way. Looking himself down on cars, BBC Sports races. Someone's going to say that he's been at an event in the last couple of years, but Gregor Hutu, actually one of the first big LAN events iRacing did, was the Intel GP Masters all those years ago. And it would be great to see Hutu actually go toe-to-toe in a live event setting with some of these drivers, because what we've seen, Randy, is that it's an entirely third skill set that these teams have actually had to come used to. First one, individual driving performance. Second one, running as a team. The third one, running in a live event setting. And I know as we look at Rebel Racing Esports, Patrick Holtzman, this is where Graham Cowell in particular has become really useful for the Red Bull Racing team, because of the fact that, of course, he's got so much experience with running in these live event settings, able to impart a lot of useful resources to his teammates.
I mean, you talk about it's a new development for the teams to have to look into in terms of talent development. I mean, it's been a new thing for us to have to look in and develop as well, just on the broadcasting side of things. He's, of course, completely unique in his challenges and all that it presents. But there might actually be advantage as well there, Will, with those teams that are bringing in sort of the real drivers. Because, of course, real drivers are used to being, you know, not in the comfort of their own home as it is. They're used to being in a race car, and, you know, for some, you know, even professional level drivers, they may be in a different car every single time they head out to the racetrack. But, you know, if you're used to being outside the comfort of your own home, that's probably going to translate over to the virtual world as well, running at these various LAN events that have been going on. As we're taking a look there at MSI Esports and BS Competition for a moment, those two within about a second of one another as they rolled down the racetrack. That's something else, Will. We've been monitoring lap times between Coanda and these guys. The last time around the racetrack, Mitchell did not have great speed. That said, as he comes across start-finish, that may have just been lap traffic that held him up, because he has now gotten back on pace. And actually the pace is pretty much equal between your top three. Everyone in the high 57.2s or low 57.3s.
But your top three are about half a second faster than anyone else out on track right now. The gap between Team Redline Blue and MSI Esports last time by was about 4 tenths of a second, and then everyone back was about 5 tenths slower than your top three that last time around. So right on board right now with Johannes Maywon in the number 76 SIM .de Titan car coming from last start finish line. Actually, I remember back to the first time I went to Racing Expo, Randy, and on the GT event, they got to bring their own rigs the first year I attended. And you saw a very big difference between some of the teams with their treble monitors and almost pit crews working. I say pit crews, strategists working with them, at least one on the driver with a laptop doing all these calculations, etc. And then I think it was Isaac Price basically running on a box at a single monitor.
Yeah, I mean, it is the way it is, and we've actually seen, Will, over the last year or so, or even a few years rather, the differences in hardware really come through. There's been so many different direct drive wheels and VR solutions, and some people running triple monitors, and all of that really come in over the last full years that we never saw in the past. As we're going to talking about the weather again. These guys doing the double stints. Well, the temperatures come down just a little bit on the track temp. We saw it at 90 from about the start of the race, now down to 89 degrees. That should make things a little bit easier for these guys in terms of the tire life as they run.
They are. As the wind speed actually as well, Randy, that's important. It's dropped down from about 17 kilometers an hour earlier down to almost practically nothing. And these wind speeds will help a little bit with stability, especially as we get into the second half of this race, as these tyres start to more life. What it essentially does mean is that we have now a little bit more give in the cars, because again, an airport track like Sebring, crosswinds can be hugely detrimental.
Yeah, they can, and the reason for that, of course, was the fact that the entire track is flat. You go to most racetracks, you've got a bit of geography, geology. Maybe geology is the better term. I don't know. I have a Southern California education, which basically ties in with surfing. Let's be real. But you have hills and whatnot that breaks up the wind patterns, and because of that, you can have the wind strong on one end versus the wind not strong on the other. You have all these things that can affect how the environment of the track is changed. You don't get that at one of these big flat airport style racetracks, because you don't have a big hill in the infield to block any of the wind. You have some development around the outside of the track. Of course, you watch the onboard, you can see there's some buildings around the outside of the track, and certainly some build up in the infield, but beyond that, wind is pretty much uninhibited. But that said, Will, at the same time, generally when it comes to wind, it's, in my experience, where wind tends to be the most savage is at the ultra high speed corners. And luckily here at Sebring, there's really only a couple of those that are really a big effort in terms of the wind changing the car. Turn one's going to be the big one. And besides that, I think you're pretty much fine unless you're getting into super strong gusts.
Yeah, indeed so. So we are dealing with some technical difficulties here today, which don't seem to be our doing, but we're trying to figure out how we can fix them. As we do so, we're going to try and go on board with a driver for a moment. Hopefully this will work. Let's go on board for a moment, shall we? Kevin Ellis Jr., this is the Apex Racing Team number 99 car. As we go a lap on board in some Racesport TV fan immersion. running in 10th place on track right now, Randy. And in one hand, not a bad run by the Apex Racing team, but on the flip side of that, they'd be looking for a little bit higher than that as we just turn our attention over to your race lead. Actually, we say that we are gonna, unfortunately, gonna have to give you a little bit of radio commentary for a moment here, ladies and gentlemen, here on RaceSpot TV. As well, Randy, your race leaders, as we talked about, they are still Koana Sim Sports, and they are still leading the way by quite a substantial margin right now.
Yeah, I mean, in somewhat fortunately for us, the pace differential has dropped off. They're pretty much only matching what second and third place can do, and in some regards, both Red Bull Racing Esports and Team Redline Blue are actually running quicker laps here every single trip around the racetrack. But the problem they have, Will, is that it's not by very much. It's like a tenth here, a tenth and a half there, as opposed to what we were seeing earlier on from Coanda, the 7, 8 tenths. Even full seconds at time being pulled out over that second and third place running car. Coanda just has something under the hood. I don't know what they've done to the setup of that machine to make it so good at the end of the run when light on fuel, because on old tires, Will, you would think that's when everyone should be almost kind of equal in terms of their tire life. Is end of the run, fuel is like, yeah, the tires are old, but it's really the end of, typically you're gonna only see that be a major factor when you're kind of heavy on fuel. But for these guys, they have something that, 45 45 minutes into the run, they just came alive the way no one else was able to. And I'm shocked to have that pace differential at the end of the last stint and have it not exist now when everyone's on heavy fuel trim.
But again, one of the things we need to talk about is the fact that on one hand, you've had yourself Joshua Rogers on the first half of the run handing over a car with slightly worn tyres over to Mitchell de Jong, but you've also got to argue, Randy, with the amount of time we've got left in this race, and of course we are ticking down the minutes here at Sebring, we are in a state of play now where the cars are going to start thinking about the end game. And if you've got a 7-second gap and you've got yourself this advantage and they're not really eking into it, is there a need to push as hard as you need to be doing?
I mean, it's coming down to the end of the race. If there's any point where you're going to push, this is certainly the time. We're approaching the last half hour of this event. If you're going to get on it, you need to be getting on it ASAP as these guys work. So, I mean, yeah, it's definitely a moment, but, this is definitely going to be when you're going to want to push. But that said, Will, I do know the point you're making as well. You don't want to push over the top. You don't want to try to push beyond that, 100% and, be like, oh, I think I'd maybe find a little bit of time here. Know what you can do. Don't push beyond your limit, because that's a very good way to go from maybe gaining one spot to losing 5 or 6.
Yeah, indeed. So we have got you. We promise we've got you some footage back. There we are. We do apologise, ladies and gents, here, but we are into 41 minutes remaining now in this event here on RaceSpot TV, streaming live on the iRacing Esports Network and BMW social media channels as well. Live time and scoring is available. Visit racespot.tv/timing. That one is back up to date and running for now as well. And there is a look still. Bennick riding on the coattails of Patrick Holtzman in the number 2 Red Bull Racing Esports cars. They work themselves through Big Ben and down towards the hairpin once again, Randy. So Wennick is not allowing Holtzman to get away, but actually the more important gap we want to look at is the lap time differences between Holtzman and de Jong. And when we compare these two sets, we're not going to get it up here, but not much there gained by Patrick Holtzman over the last couple of laps. Just 2 tenths per second, 139 gained, and a half tenth lost, 140.
I mean, last trip around the racetrack, your top 3 were in 6/100ths of a second of one another. Mitchell ran a 56.9 flat, Holzman a 56.96, and Redline Blue a 56.93. So they're all pretty much equal and on top of one another. It's just they're, the second and third are, of course, nose to tail, and of course, Mitchell about 8 seconds out ahead. So we might be looking at a pretty much relying on Coanda to make a mistake for any way to make this be a battle for the race win. But yeah, up and down the field, we've seen a lot of our gaps really kind of grow out. Redline Orange and Williams Esports BenQ is really the only other fight we have near the pointy end of the field that's super close. So MSI Esports and BS Competition, that's only 6 tenths, but they've got a little bit more space between them.
They are. Let's go on board with that BS competition car of Alexander Voss, and then you've got yourself MSI Esports and Salva Talent just ahead in the number 14 car. 6 tenths of a second they work themselves through the exit of Sunset Bend once again, down towards start finish line, and 39 minutes remaining in this event. We'll get an update on the lap gap differences between them. At the moment, slightly further back, side by side, Coanda Sim Sports, AAA Esports Black, through Sunset Bend, AAA Esports Black and Daryl LaFonte in 13th place. We'll get ourselves another look at that one, Randy, because they went side by side, down part of the back straight away and in towards Sunset Bend. Here's a look from our overhead camera.
Yeah, so these guys really doing everything they can here to keep up this fight. But man, I mean, it's been a little bit of a growing battle here as we take a look, and it's been good.
Yeah, David Williams then just losing that position to Daniel Lafonte as they head themselves through, exiting Sunset Bend towards the start-finish line again. So Williams losing a spot to AAA Esports, up a spot, up into 13th place, and just ahead, by the way, Team Redline Black and Kevin Ellis Jr. This is a battle going on for 9th place on track. Who2 hunting down Ellis Jr. I remember actually seeing these two drivers in a battle earlier on this year, and Ellis Jr. really holding his own there. Ellis Jr. for Apex Racing Team, probably one of the most eclectic sim races that we can talk about. Always fun to see at these live events here, Randy. And then, of course, you've got Gregor Who2, who we haven't seen for a while at these live events, but incredible history and depth of history in sim racing, spanning 2+ decades now.
Yep. Oh, and a car behind him actually going around. That was John Derrick in the Black Sheep Motorsports number 409, just losing the back of that car and taking a quick spin around, maybe trying to follow the likes of Gregor and Kevin Ellis Jr. through Le Mans and onto the back straightaway. Is actually looking back at my live pictures, Kevin doing everything he can to break the draft from Gregor Who2 as they scream down in towards turn 17. A little bit more narrow entry by Gregor as they enter this final corner. One of my favorite things about this last corner at Sebring is the fact that there's not a single racing line. There's 2 or 3 different ways you can sort of take that final corner. What do you got? Yeah,
so actually, number 72 car, Jonas Waldmeyer, also had himself a moment around the same time, and he's out of the race there. The number 72 car, Jonas Waldmeyer, out of this event. A silly spin. I've got to be careful. So we got into so much trouble after the Bathurst race, saying a silly spin with Verstappen down at turn number 4 at Bathurst, but that's a silly spin there by Jonas Waldmeyer down at Le Mans corner. Now, it is easy to do when you're offline, Randy. Especially
wait a minute, they didn't hit anything. Why did they pull out of the race?
I have no idea. They didn't hit anything. They just had it's one of those things. They were offline down into turn 16. You can see the back end of that car just stepping out. They got onto the grass, but they put it off.
This is something I've always been critical of teams doing. I can't remember which team it was, but it was in a Bathurst, one of the World Championship GT races back in the day. And I remember seeing a team have a very similar situation. Spun off, granted that was at the start of the race in the example I'm remembering, and they just basically just exited the sim, and Jonas Waldmeyer just did the same thing. And I know that maybe they weren't super happy with you, Will, after criticizing Verstappen for crashing at Bathurst, but yeah, it's a silly little spin, but why are you just quitting the race? Why are you there's still 30 minutes to go. Yeah, you're going to lose a bunch of spots, but you're still going to be probably in it for at least a top 20 plus. At least stay out there and run to the finish with your completely clean race car.
And that might be one of those things when you've got a race where only the top 3 pays out points. Of course, what we're not going to want to see is 20 drivers just put it over at the side of the racetrack because of the fact that they're not going to get a prize winning position. And most of these teams, again, they're running for pride, for sponsors, for everything else. For the entire 120 minutes, we've got ourselves close battle going on. AAA Esports Black and Vanderbilt Sim Racing Blue. Daniel Lafonte versus Wyatt Gooding as they work through Sunset Bend. And on the exit of that final corner, down towards the start-finish line. And of course, unless there was a hardware failure that we weren't aware of, Randy, we've always got to temper our comments with, what might look to be a silly spin could well have been a hardware failure that we're not aware of.
Possibly, maybe something to think about. That car has actually since pulled back out onto the racetrack, so that might be the situation. But I will say it's not what it looked like at the time. But yeah, I mean it's one of the things you always have to keep in mind is Wyatt doing everything he can to try to keep up with the teams around him and are in front of him is Daniel Lafuente, doing a good job managing that gap.
As we're back on board, Wyatt Goodham into the hairpin. Turn number 7 on track. He's got himself Daniel Lafuente just ahead by 0.6 of a second. A second back is Williams Esports Razor car as Sami Matti-Trojan right now. And Sami Matti-Trojan on the outside of the top 10 then. Williams Esports, although, they have got 2 of their cars now. Randy, inside the top 10 have Williams Esports. So, not the best start to their race. Their first hour, they seem to be out of sorts a little bit, but their second hour, they got a lot faster. And maybe, this is what we talked about in terms of strategy, they built their car to run for 2 hours. Their strategy and everything to run so they peak in the second hour, rather than having a car that works well very early on and then having to defend for the last part of the race.
Yeah, I mean, that's just good strategy. I think if that's what you're trying to do is work your way forward, and especially if you know that you're coming in and say, right, unless it's super hot weather, unless the track's going to be this obscene track temperature, going to double stint the tires, build the car for that. Don't just try to make it fast. Don't just try to make it fast for 1 hour. Try to make it fast for all 2. And it's great to see teams really start to do that here in recent years. In the past, you wouldn't really see that as frequently. I remember talking at one point saying that whenever you had to test setups a couple years ago, you had to test for the double stint and potentially do 2 hours testing pretty much every setup change potentially to make sure that it didn't kill the tires. I remember some people laughing at me, and that's the sort of testing you have to do these days to know that, especially at this level, you have to know, all right, this is to test what the car does on old tires. Someone's going to go out and buzz the car around for an hour. That's essentially wasted time before you get into the nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah, indeed. And that's one of those things. We talk about the teams getting depth in numbers over the last couple of years, especially some of the top teams. And that's part of the reason why, because you need that manpower to test for these big events. And that's one of the big differences between sim racing and running in a real-life event here at Sebring. You get more track time on iRacing. That opens up the strategy playbook a little bit more. Some of these teams will have been thinking, okay, we've got a potential setup that will bolt onto that car dependent on the track conditions at the start of the race tracking, and have an idea maybe of how the track conditions will change. But if they knew that the track temperature is going to be above maybe 105 degrees Fahrenheit, then they would have had a completely different setup that they'd put onto that car compared to running in the 80s, 90s compared to what we have now.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right about that. I mean, these guys are going to test in the various weather conditions. They're going to test in, generally speaking, there's 3 things you'll do. You'll usually test in a bit of a quote-unquote default, kind of more moderate, which is what we have now, and then you'll test hot, and then you'll test cold. You can, anything that's made for the moderate temps, you can generally easily adjust up or down. But you can't say build a setup in the cold weather and then make it work in the hot. It tends to just not work that way. It's just better off to just start from either a base setup or just something from that middle value. And it's always good to have in the back of your head. And of course, it might sound like it's a lot of work, and of course it certainly is. But over time, a lot of these things are just going to become common knowledge to these drivers, and you're not going to necessarily have to test as much because you're going to know what generally works for you and what works in the setup. In the various conditions as time goes on, and you'll have to know, it's like, oh, okay, if it's about X starting temp, the tires are going to have to be this, and I have to do this with the roll bars, the springs. It's not like you're starting completely from scratch every single time you load the car in the track.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, ironically, what I teach at university, so often process is more important to understand the fundamentals of first. What when esports just getting themselves past glowing disc and motorsport to be yellow, getting themselves down into turn number 1. And Diego Pinera then up into 24th place on track, getting himself past Tim Koch in the glowing disc motorsports 7 car. And one of the things I teach so heavily at university, Randy, is process is probably early on in particular more important than actually success. And you need to understand the process in order to become adaptable. And for so many of these teams, we've seen them change the way they approach these races over the years. So that even though, back in day, you used to have one magical way of setting up and running a car, that doesn't apply, especially in the longer races. But even when we get now into the shorter 2-hour events again, because of the track conditions changing, because of the balance of the race car changing over time, because things like double stinting your tyres is becoming a necessity in so many cases, unless the track temperature is above a good level. All these things have changed so much. Just like the back of the picture, Andrew Carl almost looked as though he put that car off the racetrack down at the Mon corner. I want to get a replay of that one right here. And of course, you always see one thing when you're looking at a car, a wide camera angle, another one when you're on board of him. It's going to look so nice and simple here. Yeah, it just goes very wide onto that very wide rumble strip of the exit 16.
Yeah, and that wide rumble strip is a dangerous one. I know that once you get out there, it can be very easy to loop that car around. I mean, that's pretty much how I got my start in broadcasting. Actually, my very first Glacier Racing broadcast, or Glacier TV rather, broadcast was looping a car on the curbing just like that. But yeah, Andrew Cole pushing a little bit wide as he came onto the Ullman straight there. But you're right. I mean, the process and the procedure is definitely the big thing. Get to know, okay, how do we, just getting, and of course that process may not be the same for everyone. Will get what works for you and stick to it. Don't then just say, oh, this is what this team does, so this is what you need to do. You might want to take input and maybe even look at other teams, especially if some teams you might align with or work with. We've seen that throughout the years as well. If there's things they maybe do that is interesting, implement that somehow into your workflow, but you don't necessarily have to just Control C, Control V, whatever it is they happen to be doing.
Max Rennick's fallen a little bit back. I say a little bit, the gap's only half a second between the two of them. But more importantly, the gap between P1 and P2, Mitchell de Jong is managing that gap right now as he comes past the start-finish line. Start his full 8th lap here around Sebring. There's a little bit of lap traffic that is slowly coming into play as we go on board with Patrick Holtman in the number 2 car. And the lap gaps will show now at the bottom of your screen. Holtzman's gained 2 times per second lap number 46, 2 times per second lap number 47, but with the time remaining, that isn't going to be fast enough. And that kind of goes back to the point that I made earlier on, that managing a race, yes, you want to push as hard as you can in the last part of it, but if you can manage those tyres through minutes 60 through 90, it just softens the blow a little bit if they do start gaining the last 30 minutes of the event. And I'm interested to see both Holtzman and Venig what will happen, because they've both been running in the dirty air at some point in this race for a period of of time. Red Bull Racing Esports having to come back after that slowdown penalty on lap number 1. Max Venig, twice now that car has been behind the Red Bull Racing Esports car, and that dirty air will hugely impact the tyre life of their BMW M8 GTE cars, and as a consequence, in this last 27 minutes or so of the race, temper down how much punch you've got to then put into the fast laps if you do indeed get some.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, the dirty air can definitely have an effect in these GT cars. I remember in years past, Will, it was always just sort of single-seaters and maybe prototypes that whenever you were talking about the dirty air, that would ever really be affected. But it was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that the GT cars started becoming intricate enough, both in real life and in the sim, that dirty air used to really be a factor. I mean, I remember running the some of the older GT2 spec cars, which had a good amount of aero, but, they weren't super aerodynamic compared to today. I mean, it is night and day the difference that you have when you pull up behind a car in traffic compared to what we have, in 2012, 2013, 2014, compared to the machines today.
And of course, don't forget, in a couple of weeks' time, these cars will be running in the 12 hours of Sebring. Before that, we got ourselves the iRacing version of that coming soon as well. There's a pack developing again, by the way, in the top 10. You've got MSI Esports and BS Competition. They're separated by about half a second on track. 2 seconds and back to 6th place in Williams Esports venue. And it seems to be that Apex Racing team are closing up to these 2 Williams cars. We might end up, Randy, we're scintillating the last couple of laps from about P5 all the way down to maybe P9 on track if we're lucky.
Yeah, definitely could end up working out the way things are going here, as there is a couple lap cars kind of in the midst of this little fight as well. But you're right, definitely a ton of potential to maybe see here towards the top 10.
So just to let you know, by the way, details of the 12 hours of Sebring will be taking place on March the 13th through 15th. That'll be here live on the iRacing Esports Network. As ever, our broadcast will be on March the 14th, 12 hours non-stop here live on RaceSport TV and on the iRacing Esports Network. And the BMW M8 GTE will be one of the 4 cars taking place in the GTE field for that event. And well, we've had 2 very different endurance races so far this year, Randy, in the iRacing special event calendar. We had Daytona, it was all about the drafting. We had Bathurst, which was all about managing the car. Sebring is a bit of a hybrid of both. You've got this long straightaways, up 3 or 4 points on the racetrack. That means that you've got to trim that car out a little bit, but at the same time, the middle sector of this race and the fact the track is so narrow, survival is a key part.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and it's probably going to be the first we've seen, Will, that's all about tire management. I mean, we saw interesting tire strategy at Daytona, but it wasn't overly a factor. And knowing the GT3 cars at Bathurst, I think they probably would have been taking tires pretty much every time they came down pit road. I didn't get a chance actually to watch that race, but just knowing the GT3 cars, I know that's probably the case. But here at Sebring, you know, you're right. It's going to be managing the car in terms of the tires, but also managing everything else as well in terms of the traffic. It's going to be a fun one for sure. The Sebring is personally my favorite racetrack in the world, so I always love watching the 12-hour.
It is a fun race. Of course, last year they had that great doubleheader at Sebring with the World Endurance Championship side by side right now between Radicals Online, Prologue, React Esports. So also we got side by side. Oh, Red Bull Racing Esports in the grass.
Oh no.
Patrick Holtzman in the grass. Replay coming up. What has happened with Holtzman? This is Team Redline going down to the inside. This is into Cunningham corner. We need a better angle than that, Randy, because Holtzman, it looks like he was on the outside line. From that first angle, I was thinking maybe he pinched down a little bit on Team Redline, but I need to get another look, and this is going to be a good one as they come down into the corner. Let's pause it right about now, and yeah, it seemed to be that Team Redline weren't tracking into the corner at the same time as the Red Bull Racing Esports car. Red Bull Racing Esports were kind of using that painted, I say painted, the tarmac line with all the racing line in effect, and Team Redline Blue just weren't committing to the apex of the corner by that point.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, the thing is that with Holtzman where he was turning in, Will, that's where you would turn in if you didn't have a car to your right-hand side if you're trying to get down to the far end side. But of course, if you have a car that's nosed up beside you, you're not going to be turning in there. You're going to be turning in a bit later because it is really difficult to run that corner side by side. You have to turn in really late, both if you're the car that's in the middle trying to get down to the bottom and if you're the car that's on the outside. It's such a narrow entry even when you're running single file. So I think Holtzman, I think he just turned in too early. I think he was hoping he would either be able to clear or almost scare the 71 off the corner there. But, you know, I think that's on Patrick up top for turning in way too soon.
I'd agree on that one, mainly because of the fact that you're right. Running too wide and you're the car on the inside, taking that inside shallow line just destroys your run then through Collier Corner and down towards Tower. So you will normally try and trap that car out a little bit. And of course, there will be people saying, well, you're going to take the inside line. It's your responsibility to ensure that you allow the car on the outside to make the move. But you saw, it's one of those, again, 50-50 racing going on there. I think that you're right. Red Bull Racing Esports could have just waited a tiny iota turn into that corner. But what it does mean is they're now down to third place again, 6.2 back from Team Redline Blue. But because of the gap these two have been pulling out over MSI Esports and BS Competition, no further losses there for Red Bull Racing Esports.
Yeah, so it's at least, you know, minimal damage control there. But now the question's going to be is, does Redline Blue have any damage on that race car? They still managed a pretty decent lap, even though they had that contact at a 57.8. Compare that to Mitchell, who's down in the 56s. But we'll get the first indication of if that car is hurt really this next trip around the racetrack. If it is, it's not going to be very much. And I think over the, you know, considering we're only talking the last 20 minutes of the event, we're probably not going to see any issues with that car. And immediately back down to the 56s goes Max Winnig with a 56.9, but Mitchell still cruising along, 56.6, his lap 51.
Yeah, just to let you know, only two retirees in our event here today. They are Phoenix Racing Esports and Tavares Kolek company out of the event. 47 cars are still running on the track, of which 33 of them are still on the lead. That, granted, it is a almost 2-minute lap here around Sebring, but that's a much better attrition rate than what we had when we did our last special event at Bathurst, and also better attrition rate than what we had at Daytona for the BMW SIM 120 Cup race there. So all bodes well for the 12 hours of Sebring in a couple of weeks if things stay as they are. But I think overall, a lot more, because this race has been so different, Randy, to what Daytona. Less fuel saving, less mind game politics, more about pure racing. What it's essentially meant, the field's got to spread itself out a little bit more. And with the exception of the incident we just saw with Team Redline and Red Bull Racing Esports, there's not been many car-to-car contacts here today.
Thing is, though, well, you talk about, maybe it could be a very clean race. The thing to keep in mind is that the Sebring 12-hour is a multi-class event, and this is a narrow racetrack. So when you have prototypes trying to cycle by GT cars, and in some cases GTE cars trying to cycle by GT3 cars, I don't think it's going to be that clean of a race, simply because the track is really, really narrow, and this is definitely one of the problem tracks at times because of that. Especially, thinking the run into turn 3, the run into the hairpin through Cunningham, as we saw, Tower, Bishop. There's going to be, I think, our fair share of incidents in the 12-hour.
Yeah, as we're looking on board, by the way, we've run Simsport number 78, Andreas Johansson in the number 78 car, just behind by about a second now. Rafael Rezek in the AAA Esports white car as they head themselves down. And also, I have to say that running Simsport car has got a lot more vibrant orange since the last one we saw on a racetrack when we tried to define the exact car colour for it, and we didn't come up with anything that I think was satisfactory to that car team. They've almost got that orange now, the same hue as the kind of Simsport orange.
Yeah, but they don't have the white or purple either, so even though there's it might be the same orange, they're not quite rocking the full color scheme. And it's been a while since we've seen sort of a unique color scheme really pop up in a while. Quanda still, I think, holds the king of unique paint schemes with the purple, white, and orange. That said, I've also been a fan of the Williams Esports. I love the green and blue that the Razor car has. Just works very, very well. You wouldn't think they would, but just great looking color scheme with the simple fade.
And also, this is just like BMW a little bit, the blue, red and white of BMW's livery, we've got to admit, Randy, we see blue, red and white so often on cars, and AAA Esports black there, into the wall, after contact with Team Redline and Gregor Hutu's number 73 car.
Well, we're going to be seeing some black and blue on the number 211, so huge incident with Gregor Hutu. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we've been talking about, Will. The narrow racetrack, just a slight contact with Gregor in that 211, and I'm not sure what Gregor could have done there, but that just throws that car into the tire barrier, and man, one little mistake, and that's the first big incident we've seen in a while.
Yeah, it is. Let's get ourselves one more look. This is from the rear of Gregor Hutu. And there you see a little bit of contact, and there we'll see just in the background the 211 car into the wall. Wow, I think that scared Racebot cats there on both sides of the continent, to be honest. As that does push the AAA Esports car down into 13th place. They are still on track. They've got a couple of moments to go before they come back on towards pit road. Let's just keep an eye out. And again, with only 15 minutes of the race to go, it's almost survival mode. And again, this is another element to endurance racing, Randy, that in these longer races, survival mode is so important because, yes, your car might be a second and a half a lap slower, but it's going to be quicker for you to stay out on track here and try and nurse the car home compared to actually bring that car on pit road and getting some damage repairs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that here with 15 minutes. Unless you have huge damage, you don't want to be coming down pit road for anything from here on out. That would be a race killer.
As Andrew Carl, oh, look at that, double over under there by Andrew Carl. We'll check G Altus Esports car over the Williams Esports number 1 car. Philip Eng behind the wheel of that. On board with Philip Eng right now as he heads himself through the little chicane part of the track at turns number 2, 3, and 4. Now through Big Bend Interestingly, Philip hasn't actually shared this car with anyone else here today, Randy. And we all know what that is going to mean.
Yeah, he did. He ran with Maurice Lohner.
Oh, yes, you're right. Completely ignore me. That's our graphics not working because of the issues we had earlier. So, yeah, Maurice Lohner in that car early on. Philip on that car right now.
Does he normally run for the Williams group these days? Because I know Philip was normally one of the ones whenever we did these, he'd be in the special BMW Works team.
Yeah, it'd be the Catane car with Nicky Catberg. But here today, he's actually running with Williams Esports. With Maurice Lohner. And again, you got to remember, we are into the month of March now, Randy. Of course, one thing, March Madness, yippee. Number two, it means that for a lot of these drivers, real-world racing commitments are starting to kick in. And that does mean that for a lot of these teams, actually, in these BMW Still 120, both in terms of drivers, with open brackets, so open quotation marks, real life, close quotation marks, racing commitments, but also these sim racing teams are things like the World Championship Series coming on up. It does mean that commitments will impact on the level of competition they can bring in the next couple of races.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when you're busy going around the various sorts of motorsports, especially, I mean, the sort of racing BMW has its hand in, which is pretty much everything worldwide, let's be honest. There could be drivers going all over the place, and it's going to be really interesting to see how these various teams, how these various drivers, especially the ones that really rely on some of the real running guys, how they develop throughout the year, and if they're able to gain momentum and be able to keep that up.
Of course, a lot of these teams over the years have been using iRacing on track as a trading tool, well, which is interesting. As by the way, we've got ourselves a dual class, an Apex Racing team, 99, track 4P number 7 on track. I would love to see a company come up with essentially a drag and lift sim racing rig where you can almost take it with you to travel. Probably a couple of years away from that one, as Ken Owens Jr. looks once, it looks twice as he tries to get a move done in towards the kind of chicane section for the Mon corner. Can't do anything there. Just let you know, it's Alex Arana in the number 86 Williams car just ahead. So these two Williams cars will work together in terms of helping the draft, try and prevent Kevin Ellis Jr. from getting the run down into Sunset Bend. Ellis Jr. dunks out of the draft into Sunset, can't do anything, takes an ultra wide line. That ties him up through Sunset Bend. Gets a good run out of the corner, but oh my word, that was close to ball, Randy.
Yeah, it was. It was definitely a little bit tight, but yeah, still doing everything you can. But there is a couple points, of course, on this track where you get close to the wall, but especially there coming out of Sunset is really the notable one.
As Williams sees Jill Glass, we just have a look behind of their car right now. As gap remains at about a quarter of a second, slightly over. Mitchell DeYoung, that gap up to himself and team red line blue, up to 9.2 seconds. So you always hit that part of the race, Randy, where your team principals and the people helping us trust you say, okay, it's now very difficult for you as Ellis Jr. down to the inside will get the move done. And Williams Esports off the hook going wide down at the hairpin as well. Replay coming up for you now. As you see, last from about 4 car lengths back will come the Apex Racing team of Kevin Ellis Jr. Ellis Jr. has danced it down to the inside after the hook. They do make contact there through the center of the hairpin, and Arthur goes out onto the grass. But wow, that's a position up then for the Apex Racing team car. We're going to have a look on board of him right now as they come into the hairpin. But out front, Randy, the point I was trying to make, you get to a point with maybe 10 minutes remaining in the race and they say to you, look, unless a miracle happens, you're not going to close up, and then you go into the case of preserving the position that you have. I have seen it in the past where teams have incidents late on and then other teams rue the fact they didn't keep the pressure up the last part of the race, but as it stands, 9.1 seconds with 10 minutes to go, this is where you normally tell two red line drivers to just calm it down, bring the car home.
Yeah, I mean, if you're redline, though, I think you make a good point. You don't want to completely take the pressure off. You still want to do everything you can. I mean, last time around the racetrack, they were 4/10 quicker with Max Winnig and Team Redline Blue, so don't just give up. Maybe, it's a possibility if that Coanda car in this last 10-minute window really struggles on the tires. I've seen these sort of gaps come down in 10-minute windows before. It'd be a big ask, but you know, if those tires go away, it's not out completely of the realm of possibilities here. So keep the pressure up, but you're right, you may not necessarily want to go full bore, because you don't want to potentially throw away an amazing finish by just getting loose and spinning off of the racetrack, which we've seen here late, Will. We've seen a few of those issues in about the last 20 minutes. We've seen, I think, 4 or 5 of them in the last 20 minutes, and we saw like 1 in the previous hour and a half before that.
Yeah, we've got Rafael Rezek, by the way, the Eastwards, the white car, looking to try and gain some positions back on the outside of the number 118 Commander Sim Sports car. David Williams trying to do the over-under for the hairpin, couldn't make it work as they work through Fancher and Randy. Instead of blasting past there, he said, don't give up, don't ever give up.
Okay, you can stop now.
Yeah, you know what that is, the good old days. But that's almost 6 years ago now.
Yeah, we're getting old.
We are getting old. Racecraft Esports, they got 2 cars, on P number 25, P number 26. They got Riaz Blaxus Racing, 24th place, just ahead of them by about half a second right now. With just under 10 minutes of this race to go. And looking at the lap gaps, they are kind of in that, you know, you do a faster lap, I do a faster lap, no, you do a faster lap this time, sir. No, I'll do one this time. As they battle for 24th place on track. And they haven't actually got anyone ahead of them. So this is actually a 3-horse battle for the last 2 spots in the top 25.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to do everything they can here, but you're right, they are just kind of trading laps back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And man, it can be annoying when that happens, isn't it? Especially you get into one of these deep stints and you cycle behind a car and you feel like you're faster, but in reality you aren't. Can really be an easy way for people to get frustrated and try to pick up spots. But that said, with about 8 minutes left to go, and the 7 minutes rather left to go in this thing, I doubt we're going to see anyone get too aggressive here. But I mean, then again, you might also see people get really aggressive here.
Yeah, Rafael Rezeg, by the way, did get himself past David Williams. Got a 212 AAA Esports white car up into 11th place. They are actually less than a second behind BMW SIM Racing Blue, and even though there's no prizes for finishing in the top 10, there's always a psychological advantage for finishing inside the top 10. And there's a big gaggle. Remember, 24 car turn around, that's BMW SIM Racing Blue and Wyatt Goodham. And I was about to say, Randy, remember about 20 minutes ago I said we could have had a grandstand finish towards the rear end of your top 10. Well, we had that, then we had a moment down at the hairpin, replay coming up.
Yeah, I'm not really actually sure what happened there. I don't know if, I think Rene Penquit in front actually may have made a slight mistake and maybe checked up a little bit. And I think that kind of made that mistake happen for the 24. I don't think he was intentionally trying to get down to the inside there. Was that Vendaval car. I think it's just the way that the traffic kind of stacked up in front of him on Wyatt. I think he just almost got a little bit scared and almost forced into a mistake.
Yeah, we saw a couple of replays there by Wyatt Goodham and the Vendaval number 24 car. Down into 12th place now as a consequence, falling behind AAA Esports White and Commander Sim Sports. Lap traffic there proving to be a bit of a difference maker, as now Vendaval looking to get past David Williams and does so before the entrance into Sunset Bend. But behind Vendaval is Commander Sim Sports, then Ronin Sim Sports. So P number 10, 11, 12, 13 separated by about 2 seconds on track, and ahead actually Team Redline Black versus Williams Esports Chill Blast. That's close with less than 5 minutes, just over 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, Arthur LaHope currently in that Williams car trying to hold off a charging Gregor Hootie. Remember, we saw a little bit of contact with Gregor earlier, but that car is quick. He was about a half second quicker last time around. So
Gregor Hootie, let's go on board of him as they come through Big Bend towards the hairpin. Into the right-hander, slowest corner on the track, one of the slowest corners. Technically, turn 2, 3, and 4 is slower, but we're on board of Hootie, 3 tenths of a second behind. Apex Racing Team versus Williams Esports BenQ. They are separated by about a couple of tenths of a second right now. That's just ahead on the road by about 2 seconds. You can see it at the top of your picture as we're right on board with Gregor Hootie. We'll keep you up to date with that battle as well, as Hootie's not doing anything as they come down into Tower Corner. Apex Racing Team, Kevin Ellis Jr. Well, we know Ellis Jr. can charge. He had a great 2019 actually, did Kevin Ellis Jr. Randy. So he's got the chance to, you know, solidify his positions as one of the best drivers in the Apex Racing team as they work through the corner onto the back straight away. And Ellis Jr. has already done one big move from behind. He's 2 car lengths back as they come to Sunset.
I'd be a little bit shocked if we don't see him at least eye up the inside here to Sunset. Looks up the inside line, and Alex Arana isn't actually really challenging him. And matter of fact, I think he lifted off the throttle there. So move killing out in front. Maybe a little bit of a close moment there through Sunset. Does Arana try to work the cutback? No, Kevin's got that job done. Great move, making that move into turn 17 and managing the gap. Arana, a little bit of a run wheel down the front straightaway, but Kevin, I think, should be good here as long as he doesn't mess up turn 1.
Yeah, and I think that's good, smart heads-up driving there by Alex Arana as well, because he knew they were going to be side-by-side at some point. And going side-by-side into Sunset Bend, when you've got 2 drivers right behind, all it would have done was made a 2-horse battle and 4-horse battle. So that allowed Alex Arana to think, okay, I'll solidify P number 7 and not potentially bring my teammate and also Team Redline Black into the equation as well. So interesting strategy, but it worked out in terms of not losing too much time for Alex Arana, even though they did lose the position on track. Behind Commander Sim Sports and BMW SIM Racing Blue, separated by 7/10 of a second. Closer is another Commander car, fighting with another Williams car. This is for 20th place, and this is Jeremy Bootaloo over Philip Eng.
Yeah, so Philip getting into the mix here late. It took him a while to even realize he was registered for the race, Will, but he's becoming important here as Bootaloo's going to have a bit of a run down in towards the hairpin, and Philip's not going to fight him too hard. I think he's going to let this go, and he's off the throttle.
Yep. Breaks a little bit earlier into the hairpin. Jeremy Bootaloo then up into the top 20 for Commander Sim Sports and the number 8 car. From one Commander car to another. We're going to see the white flag next time around, Randy. Now, this is a small point, but on a long track, it's always worth noting. They are going to get about 3/4 of a lap under white flag conditions here. So that means that there might be 1 or 2 cars. We're going to be close on fuel as the car goes off just ahead of your race leader.
Yeah, so definitely a little bit of a problematic moment there for Mitchell DeYoung. Not what you want to be seeing, but able to cycle through relatively cleanly. But you're right, Will. It's not going to be the BMW 120 for these guys. It's going to be a little bit closer to the BMW 121 and a half.
Yeah, and it was the Hellraiser's Hersey car of Marcus Simonson in the number 21 machine who went off there, down in 31st place on track. So things have settled down a little bit. I don't think there's going to be too many passes for position in the last couple of laps. Although Running SimSport are putting pressure on Commander SimSport to battle the orange for the last minute and a half, plus the white flag lap on track here. Andreas Jochumsen would love to try and slot one down the inside of Commander SimSport. Their 118 car as they head themselves through Big Bend. But the issue for Running SimSport is that Commander have got a draw for some lap traffic just ahead of them. Actually, that's not lap traffic. That's Wyatt Gooden, the BMW SIM Racing blue car.
Yeah, he's trying to work his way and manage this gap, isn't he? But as things are coming down here, Wyatt's doing everything he can to keep up into this 11th spot. But man, David is on a charge, and we've seen how good the Commando cars are on late tires, or on old tires, excuse me. Even though David may not have the pace as his teammates do, he's definitely feeling the positive effects of that setup. I think they have very similar setups underneath them, and look at the run the 24 can get coming out of tower.
Yeah, as we are down to the last half a minute of this race, just to let you know, these drivers are 45 seconds behind your race leader, so even though they'll come past the start-finish line just as the time ticks down to 0, there is still 1 lap remaining in this event for all of these participants. And again, the fuel might be a tiny bit of an issue for some of these teams, especially if they run in clean air almost all of this race. But De Jong has started his last lap of the event. We are down now to the last couple of seconds. We're on to the white flag lap here. 1 more lap to go. Top 3 on the left-hand side of your screen is Commander leading from Team Redline by 9 seconds, Red Bull Racing Esports in third place right now, as there's a bit of movement. Look at this, actually. There's now 5 cars separated by nothing in towards that turn 2, 3, 4 complex. And Vanderbilt pushed the car off there. That was AAA Esports White, their second incident of the day.
Yeah, definitely not great there for Vendaval White. That's not what they would have wanted at all, but might pick them up a spot here as teams continue working their way through. But right now it's just Mitchell DeYoung who just needs to focus here, Will. No mistakes. He's got about a third of a lap left and only a couple corners to go.
Yep, so that was Rafael Rezeg and the AAA Esports White car down into 14th place. But we pick up your leaders. There's second place, Max Vanek, and there is your race leader, Mitchell DeYoung. He's been partnering with Joshua Rogers here today, once again on the BMW 120. They were in Munich a year ago, and they'll be in Munich in 2020. It is going to be Kawana Sim Sports then claiming victory in the number 81 car. DeYoung is your winner with Josh Rogers as they come past the line. Kawana Sim Sports win by 9.3 seconds over Team Redline Blue. Team Redline Blue already have punched their ticket to Munich, but now we know there's 4 drivers who'll be competing. Mitchell DeYoung, Josh Rogers, Max Veneg, and Max Beneke. Arguably, Randy, 4 of the top drivers in GT racing on iRacing in the last 3 years.
I mean, if you, I think, gave a list of these are the dream drivers I would love to have at this event, I think all 4 of those drivers would be on it. So that's amazing to see. And it's great to see as well, Will, that we see 2 different teams come out in the first 2 rounds and pick up these different wins. Great to see the different organizations being able to run strong and show what they can do.
Red Bull Racing Esports, Sebastian Joe, Patrick Holtzman, they had that slowdown penalty on lap number 1. They got back into the game, and Randy, the question's going to be, what if for Red Bull Racing Esports? What if they didn't have that slowdown penalty on the exit Le Mans corner on lap number 1? Because they could well have been battling Coanda all the way to the line based upon the pace they had throughout the race.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely fantastic, wasn't it? I don't think there's much more that you could have possibly wanted. I mean, but that said, for those guys that are running second or third, they're probably going to be thinking a little bit of what could have been, because I think they had good speed, but there's just something that the Coanda guys had that no one else could match.
Let's run yourself then through your final race results here from the BMW SIM 120 Cup at Sebring. Partnership of Mitchell DeYoung and Joshua Rogers claims victory, and with that, the drivers each win $1,200, and they each punch their ticket down to Munich at the end of the year. Kawana Sim Sports winning by 9.1 seconds over Team Redline Blue. Max Rennig and Max Maneke punched their ticket at Daytona to Munich, but that team will still win $600 each by virtue of coming home in second place. Red Bull Racing Esports, the final of your prize-paying positions, $300, Patrick Holtzman and to Sebastian Joe. But again, as we said earlier on, what if for Red Bull Racing Esports? Because they could well have been in contention to win had it not have been for a lap 1 slowdown penalty that put them out of the mix. And of course, then they had contact with Team Redline Blue later on in the race while battling for second position. MSI Esports come home in 4th place, and they'll be thinking, okay, got P4 here today. What about trying to move that forward as we go through the season and think about maybe getting ourselves over to Munich? BS competition, a good first outing for them. The Bruno Sud Dazen sponsored car coming home, P number 5. Apex Racing Team in P number 6, coming on as junior, piloting that car home. Had a good race battle with Williams Esports BenQ for 7th place as they worked through the final stage of this event. Williams Esports BenQ in 7th place, Team Redline Black in P number 8. Williams Esports Chill Blast in 9th place, and Vanderbilt SIM Racing Blue, they round out your top 10. P number 11, Ronin Simmersport. We saw them battling it out. But Koana for 10th place at the end of the event. They finished just outside of the top 10. But a good result there for Ronin Simmersport. With Koana Simmersport, David Williams actually falling behind No, I say that running sim sport, and that was dropping Williams down into 12th place at the end of this race. Movano Sim Racing Team 13th, Radicals Online 14th, and Prologue React Esports round out your top 15. Logitech G Altus Esports, Williams Esports, Razor, SimRC.de Titan, Guana Sim Sports, and AAA Esports White. They are your top 20 here today. Those rest of the results then coming up on your screen right now for you. And again, attrition rate surprisingly low here at Sebring. We had ourselves a total of 45 drivers finish the race. Only 4 teams finished out of this event. They were Black Sheep Motorsports and AAA Esports Black, Phoenix Racing, and Travais Kolek Company at the very end of your timing sheet there. In fact, actually, Black Sheep Motorsports did finish the race. They were just 2 laps down. AAA Esports Black down in 47th, Phoenix Racing East Green in 48th, and Tavares Kolek Company in P number 49. Well, what does that mean moving forward? What we do now know is there are 2 teams who have punched themselves tickets to Munich at the end of the year for the BMW live event that will be taking place, and it was Team Redline at the start of the year winning at Daytona, Koana Sim Sports winning here at Sebring in the second of our events. There are still 4 more, however, to take place here in terms of the BMW Sim 120 Cup. Our next event will be in just over 2 months' time. It will be at the Nürburgring. And then after that, we head ourselves 2 months later to Spa-Francorchamps. Road Atlanta in September, and Interlagos to round out our year on November the 8th. And of course, all of these races, they line up to events that BMW will be participating in their various motorsports programs around the world in 2020. And a reminder, congratulations to Koana Sim Sports, because $1,200 we're going to both Joshua Rogers and to Mitchell de Jong by winning the event here today, as well as that entrance into that BMW Sim event in Munich in December. $600 that will go to the 2 drivers from Pure Racing, from Team Redline Blue even. That will be Max Maneke and Max Venig. Old habits die hard. And then $300 each to Sebastian Job and to Patrick Holtzman. That is all we got time for here today, ladies and gentlemen, on Racesport TV, on the iRacing Esports Network, and on BMW's social media channels. We do apologise, as I said earlier, for some of the technical glitches we had earlier on in our broadcast, but we hope that you've had fun with us here today. Don't forget, you can always use the hashtags BMW Sim, BMW Sim 120 Sebring. Your thoughts of this race. We'll be back in a couple of moments' time for our next BMW Sim 120 Cup event. That will be at the Nürburgring, and it will be here, as ever, on Racesport TV, on the iRacing Esports Network, and on BMW's Sim Racing social media channels as well. So from Randy Cheneth and myself, Will Vincent, thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time. Goodbye from Sebring.